Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Victoria Rickman. At 2:30 a.m. on Friday, September 13, 2013, Victoria Rickman, 30, called 911 from her home on Cliffland Road in DeKalb County, Georgia. She reported a violent incident involving her fiancé, William Carter. She told the operator that he had tried to rape her again, and despite her pleas for him to stop, he didn't, so she shot him multiple times. When the police arrived, they found Victoria at the door, holding a small dog. Inside the bedroom was a scene of chaos and violence. The lifeless, naked body of a man was on the bed, riddled with bullets, and blood was splattered throughout the room, with bullet holes marking the walls and ceiling. A .40 caliber pistol was found on the nightstand. The victim, 30 years old William Carter, was declared dead at the scene. Victoria, in a state of hysteria, required medical assistance. After examining the scene, the police initially concluded that it was a case of self-defense, as Victoria claimed William had attacked her, forcing her to shoot randomly in defense. She was taken to the police station to provide a statement. However, as the investigation progressed, new details came to light. Victoria Rickman's first marriage ended in a divorce, with both parties accusing each other of abuse. During the marriage, she had a son whom she adored. At the time of the divorce, he was 8 years old. Victoria's friends described her as a devoted mother and a kind person who was always willing to help others. A few years after the divorce, Victoria met William Carter, through work colleagues. William was a successful businessman and is a divorced man. At that time, Victoria worked as a marketing consultant. They often encountered each other at work and soon began a passionate romance. They were inseparable, doing everything together and appearing to be the perfect couple. However, over time, the relationship developed issues similar to those Victoria had experienced in her first marriage. After they got engaged and moved in together, Victoria discovered that things were not as perfect as she had hoped. William became possessive, insulted her, and was physically abusive. She repeatedly forgave him and they continued living together. It was a vicious cycle of a toxic relationship that she couldn't escape. Victoria's friends advised her to leave William, they warning that things would end badly if she stayed. Victoria said she endured psychological, physical, and sexual abuse, and she felt she had no ability to change her situation. She continued to endure and forgive his behavior. However, just before the tragedy, she found the strength to leave. Then he began to harass her relentlessly. According to Victoria, that night, he broke into her house and attacked her, escalating their conflicts to a peak. He threatened to rape her, and although she resisted, but she couldn't overpower him due to his physical strength. For the first time, Victoria feared for her life, convinced that the night would end in death. Either hers or his. So, she defended herself by grabbing a gun and shooting him multiple times. Victoria's best friend fully supported her and was sure that she was in grave danger that night, otherwise, she would not have used a weapon. The friend knew there were family issues but did not think it could all end like this. The detectives decided to speak with William's family to hear their version and get a more complete picture of the relationship between Victoria and William. William's parents, who had just learned of what happened to their son, immediately denied that it was self-defense. They gave a completely different story about Victoria. The parents said they had warned their son about the dangers of such a toxic relationship. They disliked Victoria from the start because of her unpleasant personality, and they saw her as a threat to be avoided. A few weeks before the tragedy, another disturbing incident occurred during an argument between William and Victoria. His parents noticed he was bleeding and injured. He explained that Victoria had hit him on the head with a hammer and bit his back. His parents were shocked because the blow was severe and could have been fatal. They dreaded to think what might have happened if she had had a gun. Then William and Victoria separated again, and his parents hope they won't come back. He didn't press charges against she because she threatened to accuse him of rape. William's family said they often argued and these conflicts often progressed into fights. Sometimes Victoria attacked William, and sometimes he attacked her. During their 3 years their relationship was tumultuous. Victoria and William frequently reported each other to the police for issues ranging from domestic disputes to assaults. Police reports confirmed this pattern. She threatened to obtain a restraining order against he, while he threatened to have her jailed for making false accusations. A few days before William died, he and Victoria met, but the meeting did not end well. They argued, and William called 911 to request police assistance to evict Victoria from his home. When the police arrived, Victoria claimed that William had hit her, but they saw that she had no injuries. The police discovered that she had sent text messages to his phone with false accusations, claiming he had kidnapped her and threatened her, whereas he was simply asking her to leave him alone. The police helped she pack her belongings and escorted her out of his house. William told her he never wanted to see her again. Although Victoria promised not to bother him anymore, she did not keep her word. A few days later, Victoria began texting William, asking to meet, but he ignored her. She then devised a new plan and contacted his ex-wife, repeatedly harassing his ex-wife. The ex-wife complained to William about her behavior. This upset he, and he sent she a message. He said she are too dangerous to be around, and told her never to contact him or his ex-wife again. The conflict reignited. During another argument, he threatened to report her to the police because she attacked him with a hammer. Victoria was furious because she realized that this could threaten her custody of her beloved son. William's family believed this was the motive for the crime. The relationship between William and Victoria became increasingly complicated and confusing. Although Victoria alleged that she was raped by William, an autopsy found no signs of violence or internal trauma, shows that sexual intercourse was consensual. On her body, there were only 2 small bruises, one on her arm and one on her leg. These bruises appeared old and not the result of a recent struggle, as they were already fading. Her new manicure was intact without any broken nails and showed no signs of a struggle since there were no skin particles under her nails. Furthermore, William did not have any scratches, which was unusual. When the police arrived at the house, Victoria's appearance raised suspicions. While the room was covered in blood, she appeared clean. With no blood on her pajamas or body, and her hair was wet as if she had just showered. The police doubted Victoria's story and suspected her of killing William. Forensic experts thoroughly investigated the scene of the tragedy and concluded that Victoria's testimony was inaccurate. Evidence indicated that William was shot while standing with his back to Victoria. It was believed he was next to the bed, facing the window, when he was hit 3 times. One of the shots caused blood to fill his lungs, leading to a cough. The high blood spatter on the wall next to the window suggested that he was standing when shot. After coughing, he likely fell onto the bed, and Victoria continued shooting him, she firing several more shots into his chest and head. There were no signs of a struggle in the house, everything was neatly in place. This also contradicts Victoria's testimony that a struggle occurred. Victoria was detained and brought to the police station for questioning. Upon hearing she was accused of murdering William, her expression changed drastically, surprised by the accusation. When the police tried to collect her phone as evidence for examination, she tried to snatch it back furiously. This behavior seemed strange to the investigators. It seemed that she was hiding something on the phone and feared it would be discovered. Investigators examined the correspondence between Victoria and William, as well as their phones, revealing that William deeply loved her. He sent heartfelt messages, calling her the love of his life, but expressed concern about her actions. He feared her false accusations might lead to his imprisonment. Subsequent messages from William show a marked change in tone. The investigation uncovered that Victoria had sent herself a threatening message from William's phone to incriminate him. Further evidence showed that Victoria had attacked William on at least 2 occasions, yet she called the police and claimed he attacked her. Victoria threatened to smear her neighbor Plunkett when he tried to evict her from the flat. Victoria Rickman was charged with first-degree murder and held without bail. She finally stood trial for the murder of William Carter in August 2017 after spending almost 4 years in jail. Once a vibrant and attractive woman, famous for her beautiful appearance, Victoria appeared completely different and almost unrecognizable in court. Several men testified about how skillfully she had manipulated them during flirtations, causing them to become infatuated with her and willing to do anything for her. Even some police officers admitted they were captivated by Victoria's beauty and flirtatious behavior when she responded to complaints of domestic violence, make them side with her. These officers later regretted their lack of impartiality. A prime example of Victoria's manipulation was her relationship with Deputy Sheriff Colby County Price. She reported threats from William to him. Upon seeing bruises on her body, he entrusted her with one of his personal pistols for self-defense. This same pistol was used in the shooting of William. Additionally, the deputy sheriff took Victoria to a shooting range and taught her how to use a gun, and she developed her shooting skills expertly. After William was murdered, Victoria first called Cuba Price and then, on his advice, she called 911. During the trial, Cuba Price admitted he was captivated by Victoria despite being married at the time. He thought their relationship might evolve, but denied having an affair, stating they were just friends. By the trial, he no longer worked at the sheriff's office and was instead an instructor at the Air Force Base. He had been fired 5 days after William's death for not cooperating with the investigation, as he protected and defended Victoria. The charges alleged that Victoria used her charm to entice William to her home on that tragic night. Sadly, William could no longer share his side of the story, so the prosecutor presented it on his behalf. According to the prosecutor, Victoria called William that evening, inviting him over with the promise of intimacy, thereby luring him into a trap. Once he arrived, she allegedly took advantage of the situation and killed him in cold blood by shooting him 9 times. The prosecutor argued that shooting him 9 times was excessive. Her decisive actions suggested premeditation, leading the prosecutor to conclude that it was a planned murder. Additional evidence supported this conclusion. At the time of the murder, Victoria was living with another man, Andrew, in his house. That night, she asked Andrew to stay at his mother's house so she could be alone and get a good night's sleep. Trusting her, Andrew agreed and went to his mother's. Just half an hour after he left, Victoria contacted William, and he arrived at her house after midnight. It's unclear what she said to him on the phone, but it's presumed she invited him over. There were no signs of forced entry. Victoria herself opened the door for William. He did not break into her home and was unaware of her address until she gave it to him during the call. During the trial, the doctor who examined Victoria after the murder testified, and photos of Victoria were presented. The doctor stated that he found no injuries on her body, including any defensive wounds or fresh bruises. It appeared she had not been raped, as their relationship was consensual. Notably, a bruise on her hand, which she claimed was from a fight with he, was visible in a selfie taken the day before his murder, proving it was unrelated to self-defense. Photographs from the crime scene were also shown at the trial. William's naked body, with multiple gunshot wounds, was found lying face up on the bed. His clothes were on the floor next to the bed, his watch was neatly placed on the nightstand, and he held a gold chain in his left hand. It seemed he was disturbed while dressing, and when he tried to refasten his necklace, he was shot. An expert confirmed that William was shot from behind, indicating he posed no threat to Victoria. An autopsy revealed that William was shot 9 times. 4 times in the chest, 3 in the back, and twice in the head. He also had bruises on his chin and left hand, likely caused by a blunt object. Blood spatters were found on the wall, curtains, and pillows on the floor. The medical examiner suggested that William was facing the window when he was first shot in the back, fell onto the bed, and was then shot the remaining times. During the trial, questions were raised about the reloading of the pistol. The pistol can only hold 12 rounds, yet 9 spent cartridges were found at the scene, leaving 4 bullets in the pistol. This totals 13 bullets, leading the prosecution to conclude that Victoria had reloaded the pistol. If she reloaded, the act could not be deemed as self-defense, as reloading shows premeditation. At the trial, a neighbor named Plankett testified that Victoria had previously threatened him when he attempted to evict her from her apartment. She threatened to accuse him of rape, causing him to back down to avoid trouble. Victoria had filed multiple rape complaints against different men, but no criminal cases were initiated because there was no evidence beyond her claims. The prosecution found it suspicious that all the men around her were accused of rape. The lawyer argued that Victoria was a vulnerable and defenseless woman in life. She had suffered violence from both her first husband and William, her fiancé. On the night of the incident, William broke into her house, assaulted, and raped her, then threatened her life. To protect herself, she used a firearm provided by her friend, the deputy sheriff. The lawyer asserted that this was clearly a case of self-defense. The defense stated that William arrived at Victoria's house intoxicated and under medication. A doctor testified that 3 days before his death, William reported experiencing delirium and was prescribed antipsychotics to aid his sleep. The lawyer also suggested he might have used illegal drugs that night, causing his aggression. However, it remains unknown whether he was intoxicated or on drugs that night, as no toxicology test was conducted. Dr. Chris Lees Perry, the former Georgia chief medical examiner, testified for the defense, indicating that Victoria first shot William in the chest, not the back. During the trial, Victoria's 911 call was played, and the lawyer stressed that the emotions she expressed were genuine and couldn't be faked. She sounded truly desperate. Victoria's best friend testified for the defense, stating that she had seen bruises on Victoria before, which Victoria claimed were caused by William. However, the friend never witnessed any violent incidents and couldn't confirm the bruises were from William. She did recall overhearing William yelling at Victoria on the phone once. Seeing Victoria's distress during that call convinced her that Victoria was a victim of domestic violence and not capable of murder. She believed Victoria acted in self-defense. The defense also highlighted William's troubled past. He had struggled with substance abuse and had been arrested several times for property damage. After 10 years of marijuana use, he went to rehab. William's parents confirmed this thing, but they said that he had overcome his addiction, rebuilt his life, and started a business. They were proud of his recovery and believed that Victoria was his last obsession. They felt that whenever she called, he would rush to her without realizing the potential danger. The prosecution presented a dramatic video recorded on Victoria's mobile phone 4 months before William's death. In the video, she threatened to call the police and accused him of rape after he kicked her out. She acted aggressively, trying to enter the house, but he prevented her. She responded that he could not tell her what to do and that she had a gun and knew how to use it. Her behavior did not seem like that of a typical victim of violence. The conversation concluded as William expressing that Victoria was frightening him, saying he did not want to see her anymore, and then leaving. The prosecution believed something similar occurred on the night of the incident, but with a tragic ending. At the trial, the jury heard 2 different yet plausible stories. They now had to decide which side was more convincing, its self-defense or premeditated murder. The jury reached a verdict in less than an hour, finding Victoria Rickman guilty. She sat silently, devastated by the decision, and cried. She addressed the judge, saying that she believed the jury was wrong. "Thank you for explaining the facts of this case. I am a mother whose son was taken from me." She describes herself as a battered woman who endured years of abuse and suffered nightmares and post-traumatic stress disorder from trying to defend herself. Victoria continued to deny her guilt and showed no remorse for shooting William. As a result, the judge was not lenient and sentenced Victoria to life in prison without parole. Her lawyer was also shocked by the verdict and sentence, considering them unfair. He believed the evidence was circumstantial and unconvincing, and that she deserved the possibility of parole and a more lenient sentence. Victoria is appealing and hopes her case will be reviewed, but so far her requests have been denied. William's daughter is being raised by his mother, and Victoria's son is being raised by her ex-husband. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Kimberly Wenger. Kimberly Wenger was born on September 25, 1963, in Bloomington, Illinois, USA. She grew up in a family of 3 siblings. However, her parents' relationship deteriorated, eventually leading to a divorce and her mother having to take care of the children. Kimberly was healthy, beautiful, and very active. She was a member of the cheerleading squad at her school, where she was quite popular. She regularly attended cheerleading camps and was highly regarded by both teachers and students. Her outgoing personality and beauty made it easy for her to make friends and socialize with her peers. Kimberly aspired to become a film actress and even achieved some success in this field. Notably, she appeared as an extra in the famous film Grand Vue. The filming took place in 1983 in Panty, Illinois, where Kimberly decided to try her luck, and it paid off. This experience became one of the most memorable moments of her life. During this time, Kimberly's mother fulfilled her long-cherished dream of owning a business by purchasing a bar with her grandmother's inheritance. Kimberly joined her mother, hoping to become part of the business. However, disagreements over her mother's vision led Kimberly to leave the company. In 1985, Kimberly met a young man named Thatcher Wenger and they began dating. Kimberly found him to be loving and kind. She soon became pregnant and they welcomed a daughter named Kelsey. The couple later married. Unfortunately, after the wedding, Thatcher's behavior changed, he becoming more cruel. This change, coupled with financial difficulties, made their situation tense. Despite taking care of the children, Kimberly found their finances inadequate and wanted to work part-time. However, she faced challenges in finding a suitable job. The family situation worsened and the couple later divorced. Kimberly soon began dating another man, Dale Fosdick. However, this relationship also failed. Dale admitted that he wanted to end things as soon as he learned that she was pregnant with his child. Not ready to be a father, he decided to disappear. Kimberly was devastated by the news because she had hoped to start a family with him. Her friends said that after the breakup, Kimberly felt abandoned and anxious because of 2 failed relationships. In the midst of this turmoil, Kimberly seriously considered terminating the pregnancy but ultimately decided to keep the baby. She gave birth to her second child, a boy named Logan. Although he broke up with Dale, he later showed up and agreed to support his son. He paid a small amount of child support from his salary, but he was not reliable in this regard. Dale was often late with his payments. They were inconsistent and clearly not enough to live comfortably and raise a child. As a result, Kimberly had to go to work while her friends took care of the children. At the time, Kimberly worked as a hairdresser. She also found extra income by working as a nanny and cleaning lady. This helped a little with the family's needs, but they were all on food stamps and lived quite poorly. Kimberly and her mother had a bad relationship, so her mother did not help her. When her son was very young, Kimberly met a pastor named Kurt Simon. They were both struggling financially, but despite their hardships, they developed a deep affection for each other and were happy together. Determined to find stability and face their challenges, Kurt loved Kimberly so much that he planned to adopt her children, and Logan even started calling him Dad. They seemed like a wonderful couple, happy and loving, unaware of the threat looming over them. On Saturday, May 22, 1993, at around 10:30 p.m., the couple returned home from a short trip. They had traveled to Quincy, where Kurt's parents lived, so his family could meet Kimberly and bless their upcoming wedding. During the trip, they also visited the university's theological seminary. Taking advantage of the opportunity, they arranged their engagement just a day before returning to Illinois. They gathered friends nearby to celebrate. Their relationship progressed quickly, and they seemed like the perfect couple. Close friends and family were thrilled about their decision, making this an important and joyful event for Kimberly and Kurt. Kurt returned in high spirits, eager to spend the entire weekend together. The following day, they planned to attend a concert featuring Kimberly's daughter, Kelsey. Kelsey, who studied at a music school, was recognized as a young prodigy. Her parents fully supported her and were eager to attend the event, intending to further encourage her by hosting a family gathering at a pizza parlor afterward. The couple arrived home in their family car and parked in the driveway. Kurt exited the car first to bring some luggage into the house. When he went back for the rest, he found Kimberly outside, smiling at him. She remarked that it felt warmer there compared to Iowa, her last words before she opened the front door. As Kimberly entered the house, a huge explosion suddenly occurred, violently throwing Kurt backwards. The explosion was so powerful that it woke the neighbors and shattered the windows of the surrounding houses. In shock, Kurt rushed into the ruined house and found Kimberly lying motionless on the floor. The right side of her skull was missing, destroyed by the explosion or debris. Tragically, Kurt could do nothing to save Kimberly. Kurt was in shock and couldn't believe what was happening. Luckily, the children had stayed with Kimberly's relatives and didn't join them on the trip. Kurt called 911 and stayed with her until the police arrived. The officers responded quickly and found Kurt crying, kneeling in the rubble of the house, holding his beloved's head in his arms. She was only 29 years old when she died. This event was strange and unusual for the entire local community in such a quiet place. People feared their homes might also be rigged to explode, so they asked the police for protection. Fortunately, no such threats were found. Explosives experts quickly scanned the crime scene to determine the best course of action and found a suspicious package in the hallway of the home. The package was rigged to explode if moved, activated by a button. When Kimberly entered the house, she noticed the unfamiliar package and, out of curiosity, attempted to inspect it. The package exploded at face level, killing her instantly. During the crime scene investigation, forensic experts discovered various bomb-making materials in the basement, such as wires, fuses, and battery wrappers. Discarded rubber gloves were also found in the trash. Although Kurt was present during the explosion, he suffered only minor injuries. As a result, the police initially considered him the main suspect. In full view of their shocked neighbors, Kurt was handcuffed, read his rights, and taken to the police station for questioning. He cooperated with the investigation, providing his fingerprints and DNA, and recounted the events leading up to the tragedy. Kurt was released hours later. His active cooperation in the investigation gave hope that the criminal would be apprehended soon. Considering Kurt was not involved in the incident, it is likely that the perpetrator brought the tools and parts needed to make the bomb. Since the entrance doors and windows were not damaged, it appears the attacker had a way into the house. The police thought this was a deliberate act of revenge against Kimberly. To avoid accidentally setting off the bomb while transporting it, the attacker probably put it together at the scene. The explosive was powerful and meant to destroy the house and kill everyone inside, which would also get rid of any evidence linking the attacker to the crime. Luckily, and some evidence was left intact, giving investigators important information. After Kurt was cleared of any wrongdoing by a solid alibi, the police questioned who would want to harm the Kimberly family. Kurt pointed them to Kimberly's mother, Cricket Lewis, who was now married to someone else and had a different last name. Kurt viewed Cricket as evil and the only person capable of such a terrible act. Cricket and Kimberly had a poor relationship, which prompted Cricket to resent Kurt. Kurt claimed that Cricket was only interested in running her bar and was indifferent to everything else. She was described as harsh and inexplicably hostile to others. Kimberly's relationship with her mother was strained and they rarely saw each other. Financial gain and power were very important to Cricket. She pushed her daughter to open a bar, allegedly making money through dubious means. Cricket inherited the fortune from her grandmother, who died suddenly despite being in good health. While the investigation was ongoing, no evidence was found to link Cricket to her grandmother's death, which was ruled to be due to natural causes. After Kimberly began working at Cricket's bar, she was exploited, receiving low wages and bonuses that were not as good as those of other employees. Despite trying to resolve her financial problems with the help of her loved ones, Kimberly only faced more challenges. Realizing the situation, Kimberly abandoned her delusions and left the bar. At Kimberly's funeral, Cricket seemed to be concerned only about losing Kimberly's insurance policy, which meant she would not receive financial compensation for her daughter's death. However, the police investigation found no evidence of malicious intent on Cricket's part. They found that she was focused on running her business. After carefully examining the information and witness statements, the police found that Cricket had no motive for the crime. It was concluded that she did not have the technical skills and abilities to build a bomb herself, and her alibi was found to be credible. When the investigation resumed, the next suspect was Kimberly's ex-husband, Thatcher Wenger. Kurt Thatcher had been involved in a custody dispute over Kimberly, making him a possible suspect in the planning and execution of the crime. Thatcher lived only 3 kilometers from the couple and worked as an engineer, suggesting that he may have had the skills and equipment to build an explosive device. However, after examining the relationship between Kimberly and Thatcher, police found that their interactions were generally friendly, with minor disagreements resolved through simple discussions. The investigation found that Thatcher had no motive for the murder and had a credible alibi that was verified. The next suspect was Kimberly's co-worker, Phil Hartman, whom she had accused of harassment in an earlier police complaint. Phil later threatened to retaliate aggressively. He admitted that he had tried to pursue a relationship with Kimberly, but she had a negative opinion of him, which led him to abandon the relationship. However, Phil also had a confirmed alibi, as he lived far from Bloomington and was out of town when the couple returned. Police also considered Logan's father, Dale Fosdick, a suspect. Dale, 31, lived on the east side of town, near Kimberly's home, and worked in the aircraft industry, assembling miniature models. Dale's expertise with equipment and ability to overhaul automotive engines made him a potential perpetrator. Police went to Dale's home with a search warrant, and he cooperated with their investigation. They found tools for assembling a device on the kitchen table, which looked suspicious. Police also discovered a large amount of components that could be used to make explosives. Several tools were confiscated, but the most notable was a pair of pliers, as the markings on the tool matched those found on bomb components in Kimberly's home. Dale also had receipts from Walmart for ammunition and other materials that closely resembled those used to make explosive devices. When the remains of the explosives were analyzed, a forensic scientist learned that they matched the components used to make explosives found at Kimberly's home. Initially, police had little evidence because most of it had been destroyed in the explosion. Forensic analysis required examining all of the evidence under a microscope. Finally, advanced methods such as gas chromatography and mass spectrometry provide direct evidence. One expert noted a distinctive design feature: 2 holes drilled into one end of the cap, which looked like the criminal's unique signature. Law enforcement databases have about 20 records of homemade devices used in crimes. With a handful matching this design, the attacker quickly assembled a random design that fit their target. Forensic experts continue to examine the remaining pieces of the device in detail. Police knew that most of the suspects had nothing to do with the massacre. Their efforts focused on proving the guilt of Dale, who had been found with suspicious items in his home. These items were stored in a basement workshop. Dale was a lonely young man living in a small house in the suburbs of Bloomington. He became upset when he discovered that his ex-girlfriend was engaged to someone else, which may have led to feelings of jealousy and revenge. This gave him a real motive for the crime, making him one of the few acquaintances of the victim to have such a motive. Forensic experts also identified other important details. The attacker used 2 different types of gunpowder, which when combined, increased the force of the explosion. A look at the crime scene showed that the explosion was so powerful that most of Kimberly's house was destroyed. Many who knew Dale believed that he could not have committed such a crime. Usually, such thoughts do not occur to good people. Police searched for any signs of cruelty or aggression in Dale's past before this violent incident. He had no history of violent crimes, legal problems, arrests for similar crimes, or drug addictions. According to many, he had recently shown concern for his child and was trying to improve his relationship with Kimberly. However, because of certain items found in his home, he became the prime suspect. He was arrested for first-degree murder and held in state prison while awaiting trial. The first trial was declared invalid due to insufficient evidence. During the hearing, a juror became ill and was unable to continue, leading to a second trial. At trial, the defense presented Dale as a devoted father and a kind, humble man, arguing that he was incapable of committing a heinous and vicious crime. His attorneys emphasized his role as a caring and loving father to convince the jury of his innocence. Dale initially objected to his girlfriend's pregnancy and fatherhood because he felt he was too young. When Kimberly decided to keep the child, he shunned her. However, he later realized his mistake and completely changed his attitude. He decided to accept paternity and aimed to restore his relationship with both his son and Kimberly, even hoping to marry her. Dale argued that there was no reason for him to harm the woman with whom he planned to start a family. On Dale's side, even the mother of the Kimberly supported him. Cricket was still convinced that her fiancé, Kurt Simon, was the murderer. The mother claimed that Kurt, who was aspiring to be a pastor, had recently become cruel and controlling towards Kimberly. This situation led to many disagreements, but there were clear inconsistencies in her claims because Kimberly rarely communicated with her mother and couldn't have known about their relationship issues. Cricket defended the Dale in every way possible. She highlighted that Dale showed her attention and tried to gain Kimberly's trust. He frequently visited to spend time with the child and had changed significantly for the better. Dale Fosdick repeatedly expressed his love, apologized for his past decisions, and tried to win Kimberly over. However, she was firm in her commitment to her new boyfriend Kurt and had no intention of breaking up. In fact, the couple planned to get married and confirmed this by getting engaged. The prosecutor's office warned that the Kimberly's decision could have dire consequences once Dale realized there was no chance of rekindling their relationship. Seeking revenge, Dale likely targeted Kurt. Despite Dale's careful planning, the Kurt miraculously survived. During the trial, one of Kimberly's sisters and her mother supported Dale, claiming his innocence. Despite this, the prosecution made a strong case. Explosives experts provided direct evidence that a large number of parts and materials suitable for making bombs were found in his home and proved that they were used to make bombs. According to S.H. Moore, Dale expressed a willingness to support Kimberly financially, but he preferred to quit his job rather than pay alimony. Meanwhile, Kimberly wanted the financial support she was entitled to from the negligent biological father of her son, so she planned to seek justice through the court. During this time, Dale grew worried that Kimberly would move away with their son to live with her fiancé. Several of Dale's co-workers mentioned his intention to gain custody of Logan to avoid alimony payments. To achieve this, he gathered evidence to discredit Kimberly, hoping it would help him strip her of parental rights and gain custody of their son. Neighbors reported seeing Dale near Kimberly's home before the explosion. Kimberly kept a spare key under the rug, allowing Dale easy access to her home. Many described Dale as a quiet, unassuming, even shy person who seemed unlikely to commit a violent crime. He was known to avoid conflict and was always positive. However, the prosecutor's office argued that Dale's personality influenced his choice of method in eliminating his victim. Not wanting to confront Kimberly directly, he resorted to a surprise and cowardly attack using an explosive device. On February 26, 1996, the jury found Dale Fosdick guilty of first-degree murder. After the verdict, the mother of the Kimberly expressed her disagreement with the decision, stating that Dale could seek her help if he needed it. She held his hand, tears in her eyes, and kissed him on the cheek, believing he was a victim of a miscarriage of justice. Dale had 25 supporters who actively defended his innocence in court. Only one juror voted against the death penalty, which was enough to spare him from it. Consequently, he was sentenced to 55 years in prison. Cricket Lewis, Kimberly's mother, continued to fight for Dale's innocence. In May 1996, she wrote a letter to the local media. She acknowledged that her stance had caused considerable public outrage and that she had faced criticism for supporting Dale, the convicted man. She was upset when her daughter's fiancé Kurt described her as the embodiment of evil in a media interview. Cricket asserted that she mourned her daughter every day and believed that the real killer was still at large. Cricket died at 65 on December 19, 2003. Her son-in-law, Kurt Simon, became a minister at the First Presbyterian Church after her death. Right after her mother's death, Kelsey moved in with her father, Thatcher Wenger, at the Salvation Army and worked in homeless shelters. Thatcher passed away at 52 on November 27, 2003. Dale was in prison and died of natural causes at 48 in 2010. Logan graduated from college, joined the Bloomington Police Force, started a family, and has a child. Hey detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Emily Longley. Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to parents Mark and Caroline Longley. 2 years later, she welcomed her younger sister, Hannah. The sisters enjoyed a close relationship while growing up in a loving family. When Emily was 9 and Hannah was 7, the family relocated to Auckland, New Zealand. Unfortunately, after Emily began associating with the wrong crowd, her parents chose to send her back to the UK to live with her grandparents and start anew. In 2010, Emily traveled to England to study at Brockenhurst College. Her goal was to earn a business degree, and she aspired to be a model. While in England, she stayed at her grandparents' house in Bournemouth, a popular resort town located on the coast of the English Channel, near Poole. At the time of her move, Emily's sister Hannah was still in school. Their parents, Mark and Caroline, had divorced but continued to have a friendly relationship. Emily was a beautiful young woman who drew a lot of attention. One day, she met 20-year-old Elliot Turner, and he left a lasting impression on her. Over time, their communication developed into a romantic relationship. In April 2011, Emily traveled back to New Zealand to visit her family, whom she hadn't seen in 6 months. Her father greeted her at the airport, and she rushed to him, hugging him tightly and expressing how much she missed him. Emily shared that she had a very close bond with her father, who adored her and missed her smile, laughter, and playful jokes. The next day, the entire family visited Emily's favorite pizzeria. She shared with her parents that, in addition to her college studies, she was involved in modeling and had made some amazing friends. She also talked about her boyfriend, 20-year-old Elliot. Although they had only been dating for a few months, Emily felt she was too young for a serious relationship. "I think I'm going to break up with him when I return," she said. Over the following weeks, Emily enjoyed spending time with friends and family, creating great memories. No one realized that they would soon lose her. When Emily's flight began boarding, she found it difficult to say goodbye to her family. She promised them she would return in 5 months. During that time, she was excited to watch the Rugby World Cup starting on September 9th. A few days later, while texting her father, Emily mentioned that she had broken up with Elliot, but she chose not to share specific details. Elliot had been acting oddly after seeing photos Emily posted on social media from New Zealand, particularly because there were other guys in the pictures, which made him very jealous. Elliot Turner, a 20-year-old from a wealthy jewelry family, appeared to live a carefree life. He was well known in the bar and club scenes of Bournemouth and Poole and was part of a group of affluent young men known as the Firm. His friends nicknamed him All Talk Turner due to his tendency to brag. In December 2010, he met Emily, and they enjoyed a lavish lifestyle together, often staying out late. However, Elliot, who had a history of being obsessed with women, quickly became jealous, leading to frequent violent arguments in their relationship. People described him as threatening, aggressive, controlling, and possessive. In January 2008, when Elliot was 16 years old, the police sent him a warning letter about harassment. They advised him not to contact his ex-girlfriend after he inundated her with text messages and emails following their breakup. Elliot enjoyed being the center of attention and did not have to work since his parents financially supported him. He was skilled at manipulating others, including his parents, and his life centered on parties, women, alcohol, and drugs. He believed he was capable of doing anything he desired. Elliot always carries a hammer with him to intimidate anyone who might challenge him. His friends thought Elliot fancied himself a gangster. Elliot would often buy drinks for everyone at the bar. Elliot liked to brag about owning a new Mini Cooper, but it was actually a gift from his grandmother. He attempted to maintain his tough guy persona by posting streetwise messages on social media, where he often called himself Scarface or God. Although he attracted a lot of female attention, he became very attached to Emily when he met her. She praised his image as a successful person, something he worked hard to achieve. As their relationship progressed, Elliot began to display increasingly controlling behavior. He even threatened Emily, saying he would take her life. Emily wrote an emotional note to Elliot expressing her feelings. 1. I love you. 2. Please don't say you'll kill me. 3. Stop bringing up your ex-girlfriends. 4. Stop being so aggressive. Relax a bit, because that is much more attractive, and you scare me because you're so intimidating. As Elliot revealed his true nature and his controlling behavior escalated to an unacceptable level, Emily understood that he was not the right person for her. Then she decided to break up with him. Unfortunately, individuals like Elliot often cannot accept rejection. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was out with friends at an entertainment venue. Surveillance footage showed her arriving at the nightclub with them. In another development, Elliot checked Emily's Facebook messages and found out she was seeing another man, which made him extremely angry. He went to the club and confronted Emily, leading to an argument. The situation escalated when Emily threw her drink at him. Elliot reacted by verbally abusing her and making threats of violence. He disapproved of Emily's outfit, claiming it was too revealing, and ignored the fact that they had broken up. Unwilling to accept the breakup, he continued to follow her after she decided to leave. His friends heard him say that he would kill her, that he would go to prison for it and still be a millionaire, and that serving 10 years in prison wouldn't bother him. Elliot convinced Emily to come to his house, saying he wanted to talk more relaxed. Elliot lived with his parents, which may have made Emily feel more at ease, thinking he would behave better around them. Neighbors observed them entering the house. The next morning, Anita Turner, Elliot's mother, called emergency services, reporting that Emily was unresponsive. The ambulance arrived around 9 a.m. Anita followed the nurse's instructions to help Emily, but unfortunately, when the paramedics arrived, they could only confirm Emily Longley had died. Anita, an Indonesian citizen, moved to the UK to marry Lee Turner. When they had a son, they gave him everything he wanted, which turned out to be a serious mistake. During a call with emergency services, Anita seemed surprisingly calm for a mother who had just discovered her son's girlfriend dead. Her demeanor was unsettlingly normal. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up at 2 a.m. to find numerous missed calls from his ex-wife Caroline and their younger daughter Hannah. He also had a voicemail from Hannah, but she was talking something that difficult to understand. Then he heard Caroline screaming in the background, saying, "Emily is dead." Mark was in disbelief. He immediately called his mother in England. When she answered, his world shattered. She was crying uncontrollably. Soon after, a police officer took the phone and said, "I'm sorry to inform you that your daughter Emily is dead." Mark was stunned. Just a week ago, Emily had been on his couch, smiling. As he flew to the UK, the grieving father struggled to accept that his daughter was truly gone. Sadly, it was no dream. The loss of their eldest daughter was an immense heartbreak for Emily's parents. The police informed them that Emily had passed away in her sleep, which didn't make sense to them since she was so young and healthy. While the police gathered some evidence, the circumstances surrounding Emily's death remained unclear, and they would have to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, told investigators that they had been at home all night and had not heard anything unusual. Meanwhile, Elliot shared his sorrow for Emily on social media by posting photos of them together. The police found no solid evidence to contradict the Turners' claim that Emily had mysteriously died in her sleep. In any death investigation, the crucial task is to determine the cause of death. Identifying the cause helps investigators understand the situation and how to approach the investigation. While they awaited the autopsy results, investigators discovered that a few days before her death, Emily had posted a concerning message on her Facebook page, stating that she had a stalker. Emily detailed in phone calls she received, saying that someone had called her, and when she had asked who it was, they replied that she didn't know them, but they knew everything about her. She had asked how they got her number, and they said they would tell her when they saw her, while persistently asking her out. Emily had hung up, but they kept calling. She made this post on Thursday, May 5th. The police discovered that before her death, Emily had a heated argument with Elliot in front of other patrons at the nightclub. Interrogation with Elliot's friends revealed that he attempted to control Emily's actions and had learned about her meeting with another man. Most alarmingly, they mentioned that Elliot had threatened her life multiple times. However, his friends dismissed these threats, believing they were merely bravado to enhance his gangster image. The autopsy did not determine a definitive cause of death, but experts suggested that strangulation might have occurred, noting that the physical evidence was consistent with pressure applied to the neck. The investigators suspected that a member of the Turner family might be involved in Emily's death, which prompted them to install listening devices in their home. The police aimed to uncover any hidden information, and their suspicions were confirmed. One recording revealed that Elliot was advising his mother on how to interact with the police and what she should say. Lee Turner, Elliot's father, seemed to be the only one aware of the wrongdoing in their actions, but he eventually succumbed to the demands of his son and wife. While reviewing the recordings, investigators discovered details about Emily Longley's death. Elliot Turner confessed to causing her death, leading to his arrest a week later. Although he denied his guilt, his lawyers attempted to dispute the validity of the audio recordings. After thoroughly examining the case, the judge permitted the prosecution to present the recordings as evidence. Unaware that the police were listening, Elliot revealed that he felt angry every day and that Emily had upset him more than anyone else ever had. During the trial in May 2012, Elliot's lawyer argued that he acted in self-defense. Turner explained that a fight in his bedroom escalated, leading him to grab Emily by the neck. He insisted that he did not strangle her and claimed he discovered her dead in his bed the next morning. On the second day of the trial, Elliot expressed his disgust with his actions that night. It was reported that after finding Emily dead, he wrote a letter to his mother expressing his shame and mentioning that he was planning to leave for Spain. This suggests that Elliot intended to leave the country on the day Emily died but ultimately changed his mind for some unknown reason. When the police arrived at his house after receiving a call, they found packed bags, and Elliot had his passport in his pocket. In court, he admitted that he had threatened Emily and felt upset and deceived the night before her death after seeing emails on her phone. He claimed he had forcefully pushed her face into a table and recounted the fight they had before her death, stating that Emily began hitting him with her hands and feet. He attempted to calm her down but eventually gave up. When asked if he planned to kill Emily, Elliot said no. He claimed he thought Emily was asleep and only realized she was dead when she didn't wake up the next morning. In an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, expressed the pain of losing his daughter. The reality of death is that it's incredibly difficult. It doesn't matter if it's your child, partner, or even your 99-year-old grandmother, it's painful when someone is here one day and gone the next. This is something we struggle to cope with. All anniversaries are tough, birthdays are tough, Christmas is tough, and Easter is especially hard because that was the last time I truly spent time with her, Mark Longley shared. He shared that the hardest part is knowing he will never see the woman she could have been. I miss watching the life she was denied develop. We had a small but beautiful glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and I felt so proud of her. As her father, I'm naturally biased, but the world truly was a better and more enjoyable place with her in it. During the trial, Elliot Turner was depicted as a privileged young man whose parents tried to protect him from facing consequences. The court revealed that he had free access to his family's home in the wealthy Queen's Park neighborhood of Bournemouth. There, he hosted wild parties for his middle-class friends, as described by his father, Lee. To ensure he didn't bother them, his parents allowed him to use a converted garage as his own living space, giving him the freedom to come and go as he pleased. It was in this room, equipped with a mini bar, that he strangled Emily while they were on his bed. The jury quickly dispelled any illusions Elliot had when they found him guilty on May 22, 2012. The court sentenced him to life in prison, with a minimum term of 16 years. While delivering the verdict, Mrs. Justice Dost described Elliot as arrogant, stating, "Emily was a lovely girl who brought joy to others. You extinguished that light. You didn't love her, she was a trophy to you. The relationship was about your control through aggression and threats. Focus on your life sentence instead of luxury." She also sentenced Elliot to 9 months for perverting justice, to run concurrently. Elliot Turner wasn't the only one involved in the trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, were also implicated. They loved their son and tried to protect him after he committed his crime. Lee destroyed a letter in which Elliot confessed, while Anita removed a jacket from the room where the letter was supposedly found. Additionally, Anita delayed calling for an ambulance, allowing Elliot time to hide evidence and let the family create a credible story for the police. When questioned about her decision to postpone the call, Anita stated that she didn't believe Emily was dead. During cross-examination, they asked her if she believed Emily had ruined her son's life. After a 6-second pause, she answered, "No." In the recording, Lee inquired whether they had made the right decision. Anita responded, "We've done the right thing." Both Anita Turner, 51, and Lee Turner, 54, were found guilty of obstructing justice and received sentences of 27 months in prison. In 2013, after serving half of their sentence, they continue to live in the house where Emily tragically died. Emily's father, Mark, broke down while discussing the verdicts. With support from his ex-wife Caroline and daughter Hannah, he expressed, "What we have heard over these 5 weeks has shocked and disgusted us. It is beyond belief that a man as evil as Elliot could treat such a gentle and loving girl like Emily so violently. We are incredibly proud that she came all the way across the world to seek a better life for herself. Unfortunately, this is the life that Elliot chose to take from her." Mark mentioned that there was much discussion about Elliot's bragging, and no one took his threat seriously until it was too late. He noted that even his mother dismissed it when he texted her about his intention to harm Emily. In October 2020, reports emerged that Elliot Turner's cellmates had assaulted him in prison. This incident followed his decision to display photos of Emily in his cell and brag about receiving letters from female admirers. The attack was triggered after he claimed he would soon go back to his luxurious lifestyle filled with champagne, Bentleys, and attractive women. In 5 years, Elliot Turner will be eligible to apply for early release. We can only hope that the parole board will act wisely and make the right choice concerning someone who has shown no remorse for his actions. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne Baldelli, born Fold, was born on June 30, 1969, in a small town in sunny Southern California. She was the third and youngest child of Marjorie and James Fold and grew up with her brother Michael and sister Michelle, with whom she developed a particularly close relationship from an early age. When Yvonne was 13, her mother passed away after a long illness. A year later, her father remarried Leland F.A., and the grown children developed a wonderful relationship with their stepmother, who was a kind and caring woman who loved her husband's children as her own. Yvonne received a solid education and explored many career paths, but her main passion was always fashion design, and she dreamed of turning her hobby into a profitable business. However, luck never seemed to be on her side when it came to her personal life. She had been married twice, but both marriages ended in divorce. Additionally, a surgery she underwent as a young woman, followed by complications, left Yvonne unable to have children. After her divorce from her second husband, Kevin Baldelli, in 2007, Yvonne lived alone in her small apartment with her dog, whom she affectionately called Baby. She kept in regular contact with her father and sister, calling them almost every day and trying to see her family at least once a month. In 2009, as Yvonne was preparing to celebrate her 40th birthday, she met a Marine named Brian Brimmager. At the time, he was legally married and had a young son with his wife. Despite this, Brian was open about his extramarital affair and shared with Yvonne that he was unhappy in his marriage, claiming that he had not filed for divorce only because he did not want to hurt his child. Yvonne fell in love with this handsome, tanned, healthy man at first sight and believed every word he said. Having experienced the pain of a loveless marriage herself and knowing how difficult it is to leave such a relationship, she did not push her partner, believing that the presence of a child was the main obstacle. However, Brian was not as straightforward and sincere as he seemed. From a young age, his attractive appearance made him very popular with the opposite sex. He was used to juggling several relationships at once and skillfully deceived the women who fell in love with him, promising each of them marriage, a family, and eternal love. It was soon discovered that the married Brian had not only met Yvonne but had also had another mistress. This other woman was Christine Verhoeven, a gorgeous blonde with many connections. She was a White House analyst. When Yvonne learned about another rival, she decided to tackle the situation directly and fight for the man she loved. Summoning her courage, she contacted Brian's wife to reveal that he was cheating on her with 2 women. This revelation caused a heated debate, forcing Brian to make a difficult decision. In the end, he chose Yvonne, though it's possible she influenced his choice. A few months later, Brian officially divorced his wife and moved in with Yvonne. At that time, he was still in the Marines but had been thinking about leaving his military career. The couple appeared genuinely happy, but Yvonne's family remained skeptical of Brian, questioning the sincerity of his feelings. In the summer of 2011, Brian expressed his desire to make significant changes in his life. He wanted to leave the military, move away from the busy city, and settle on a tropical island. Yvonne felt the same way. She supported him completely and was ready to go wherever he chose. She believed he was the most important person in her life and loved him deeply. By September of that year, they had made their decision. The couple would move to Panama and live on the small island of Carino, which they considered a true paradise. Yvonne told her family about her plans just before leaving, so they didn't have a chance to convince her to change her mind. She sold her apartment, quit her job, and began packing for the trip. Yvonne packed only a few bikinis, shorts, tank tops, and her sewing machine, aiming to start a small boutique where she could create and sell custom outfits for tourists on the new island. In early September, Brian, Yvonne, and her beloved little dog flew to Panama. They spent a few days in the capital before taking a ferry to Carino Island, where they rented a house right by the ocean. The climate was hot and humid, with consistent temperatures year-round, which attracted many tourists, especially those interested in diving and surfing. The island was only 1 square kilometer in size, allowing visitors to walk around it in about an hour. Most of the infrastructure was located along the coast, while the interior consisted of dense jungle and swampy areas filled with venomous snakes, spiders, and other wildlife, making it dangerous to explore. Brian, a talented guitar player since he was young, brought his guitar hoping to start a musical career by performing in local entertainment venues on the island. Within a week of moving, he had contacted with several local bar owners, and one of them offered him a job. He performed in the evenings, entertaining the crowd, but his audience often bought him drinks, which led him to drink heavily almost every day. Yvonne's business was growing very slowly, facing poor sales and making little profit. Nevertheless, she remained determined. She took a job at one of the bars and adopted a second dog she found on the island. Yvonne communicated with her sister, Michelle, almost every day, sharing updates, but her messages became shorter and more gloomy, causing concern for her family. The couple initially enjoyed their first few months on the island, feeling like they were in paradise. Yvonne dreamed that Brian would propose and they would have a romantic wedding by the ocean. However, as time went on, Brian didn't seem eager to get married, and their relationship began to decline. By early December, Michelle noticed that Yvonne had stopped messaging her, which made her worry. Then, on December 14, 2011, Brian unexpectedly called Michelle to ask when he could come by to pick up his SUV, which he had left in her family garage before going to Panama. This call surprised Michelle because it meant that Brian was back in the US and wanted to pick up his car. She wondered where Yvonne was and why she hadn't returned or even contacted her. Brian said he had detailed everything in an email sent a few days ago. He also said that his ex-girlfriend had supposedly messaged Yvonne about the situation. Michelle looked at her messages but found nothing, so she checked her email. She discovered 2 unread messages, one from her younger sister and another from him. In his messages, Brian stated that Yvonne had left him, running away to Costa Rica with a new lover. Another message, purportedly from Yvonne, claimed that she had left Brian after discovering his affair and learning that another woman had given birth to his child. The message ended with her stating that she had met another man and gone to Costa Rica with him. The other woman turned out to be Brian's old friend, Christine, with whom he had been involved for a long time and who was pregnant with his child when he and Yvonne flew to Panama. At first glance, everything seemed reasonable, especially since Yvonne was unable to have children. The news that her partner had fathered a child with someone else would have been extremely distressing for her. However, Yvonne was not known for acting impulsively, and she would certainly have called her younger sister to discuss such a major change in her life. Furthermore, the tone of the message purportedly from Yvonne was somewhat strange and unlike her previous communications, which raised further suspicions. When Michelle attempted to determine her younger sister's current whereabouts, she was unable to obtain any concrete information. Calls went unanswered, and incoming messages were brief and discreet, stating things like, "I'm fine, I need time," and "I'm not ready to talk about this." Michelle suggested that Brian file a missing persons report. Brian appeared concerned but insisted that it was unnecessary, asserting that Yvonne was fine, capable of taking care of herself, and would decide when to return home. Although Brian was reluctant to even discuss the matter and hurriedly left after getting the car, a message from Yvonne's phone soon arrived, stating that she planned to return home in January for their father's birthday. This message relieved Michelle, and she decided to wait a few more weeks, hoping that Yvonne would return as stated in the message. By mid-January, not only had Yvonne not returned home, but she had also not called once during that time, and her messages had stopped altogether. Furthermore, Michelle was shocked to learn that Brian had married Christine just before New Year's, which seemed very strange since he had broken up with his ex-girlfriend just weeks before the celebration. Worried, Michelle eventually went to the police department and reported her younger sister missing, suspecting that Yvonne had not gone to Costa Rica. An official investigation sent to Panama, the results showed that Yvonne had not left the country. Michelle then asked her cousin, a programmer, to help track down the IP address from which Yvonne had sent the messages, determining their true origin. It turned out that the emails purportedly sent by Yvonne from Costa Rica in December were actually sent from Dana Point, California, where Brian was staying. The same IP address was used for an email sent by Brian himself. As the situation became increasingly alarming, Michelle rushed to inform the police of her discovery. Michelle contacted the FBI and the State Department, sharing her suspicions that Brian had harmed her younger sister in Panama and then continued to send text messages and emails from her phone, pretending to be her for about a month. However, there was not enough solid evidence at the time to arrest him, so law enforcement could only interview him and continue to gather evidence of his guilt. It was revealed that Brian had proposed to Christine while still in Panama with Yvonne. He promised Christine that he would return soon, that they would marry, and that they would raise their daughter together. Furthermore, Christine did not know that Brian had come to the island with Yvonne, as he had told her he was there on business. The family's investigation began 2 months after Yvonne's disappearance when her sister and niece flew to Panama themselves. There, they sought the help of Don Winter, a former U.S. intelligence officer turned investigator specializing in finding missing U.S. citizens. They shared the story of Yvonne's disappearance and Brian's version of events. After listening to them, Don immediately expressed concern that the possibility of Yvonne being alive was very low. With extensive experience in such investigations and leveraging her connections, Don decided to put pressure on the Panamanian government and publicize the case, turning the disappearance of an American woman into international news. A press conference was held with the participation of Yvonne's family members. Later, Yvonne's father, stepmother, brother, and several other close relatives and friends traveled to Panama to join the search and assist in the investigation. Together, they went to the tropical island of Carino, searched thoroughly, but found no trace of Yvonne. Their search efforts were hampered by dense bushes and swamps filled with wild animals. In addition, The family asked the islanders how well they knew Brian and Yvonne and what they could tell them. It turned out that the couple had been drinking heavily recently and often argued loudly, disregarding those around them. They were seen at the bar almost every day, drinking and arguing violently. Furthermore, people began to notice bruises and scratches on Yvonne's face and body. She hardly ever took off her sunglasses, apparently to hide the bruises under her eyes. The couple's landlord confirmed that neighbors frequently complained about noise, screaming, and swearing coming from their residence. At the same time, FBI agents brought a special team of divers to the island to search for any potential evidence or remains of her. Unfortunately, these searches also yielded no results. Brian was initially the prime suspect in the case, but there was no concrete evidence to charge him. He denied any involvement, repeatedly telling the same story about his ex-partner running off with another man. It was not until September 21, 2012, that Brian was questioned and his home searched. At the time, his wife, Christine, was at work while Brian, unemployed, stayed home with the children and immersed in his beloved game of golf. Initially, he appeared confident, recalling that Yvonne had left him after discovering his child with another woman. However, he became visibly concerned and the police mentioned that the last messages sent under Yvonne's name came from his area and expressed interest in examining the laptop found on his desk. The confiscated laptop turned out to be Yvonne's, with messages sent from it after she had supposedly fled. A photo of Yvonne with a bruise under her eye was found on the computer, as well as a screenshot of a conversation from November in which Brian and Christine discussed their ongoing affair and the shared custody of their daughter, which is probably how Yvonne learned about them. Furthermore, the laptop search history from November 26, 2011, contained queries such as how to clean blood and how to remove blood from a mattress. These pieces of evidence were important but circumstantial, as no body or mattress with bloodstains was found. The fact that Brian had sent messages impersonating Yvonne did not conclusively prove his guilt. Don soon discovered that before leaving Panama, Brian had sold a machete he owned. In an online chat with a potential buyer, he joked that he had only used the weapon once, to finish off a stripper. The prank was so creepy that authorities tracked down the machete's new owner and confiscated the blade for testing, which initially yielded no reliable results. The long-awaited arrest came when police overlooked another crucial detail, Yvonne's bank card. Brian had used the card after she disappeared to add credibility to his story. Before returning to the United States, he decided to take a trip to Costa Rica and used her card multiple times, creating the illusion that she had actually fled to that country. He paid for his ticket in cash and withdrew money from various locations in San Jose, emptying the card before discarding it. Brian had no idea, however, that he had been caught on surveillance cameras at ATMs. In July 2013, a year and a half after Yvonne disappeared, her relatives, along with evidence collected by the police, FBI, and Don Winter, succeeded in getting Brian arrested. He was initially charged with making false statements and obstructing the investigation due to a lack of stronger evidence at that time. At that point, Brian had recently become a father for the second time, as Christine had given birth to a son just a week before his arrest. Authorities attempted to have an honest conversation with Brian, hoping he would confess to the crime and reveal where the body was, but he repeatedly denied any involvement. His lawyer argued that there was no body and no direct evidence linking Brian to Yvonne's disappearance. 2 months after Brian's arrest, investigators made a shocking discovery in the swamp that significantly advanced the case. On Canaro Island, a worker exploring a shortcut accidentally stumbled upon a partially submerged army backpack in the murky underbrush. Out of curiosity, he opened the bag and was horrified to find a human skull inside. He promptly reported the discovery to the police, who arrived to collect the backpack for further examination. Inside, they found dismembered human remains along with the bodies of 2 small dogs. The remains had been cut into pieces, placed in the bag, and hidden in a spot where they were unlikely to be discovered. DNA tests confirmed that the human remains were those of Yvonne, though some body parts were missing. Pathologists revealed that she had suffered severe trauma prior to her death, including a broken nose, cheekbone, and several missing teeth. The presence of the dogs suggested a calculated effort to support the narrative, as it seemed unlikely that Yvonne would abandon her beloved pets, implying that they were also killed and buried alongside her. The chop marks on the victim's bones matched the blade of a machete, confirming that the body had been dismembered with this one. Each machete blade has a unique pattern, similar to a fingerprint. As a result of this evidence, Brian was officially charged with murder, dismemberment, and concealing a crime. In early 2014, Michelle was diagnosed with advanced aggressive cancer. She had been so focused on investigating her younger sister's case that she neglected her own health and put off doctor visits. After 6 months of intensive treatment that didn't work, she chose to spend her remaining time fighting for justice for her sister. In September 2014, doctors informed Michelle that she had only a few weeks to live. Despite her illness, she vowed to continue advocating for her sister until her last moments. She decided to testify in front of Brian, sharing everything she knew and providing all correspondence with Yvonne to the court. She carefully recounted Brian's actions following her sister's disappearance, but then fainted from exhaustion. Michelle died 3 days later. The prosecution contended that on the night of November 26, after another argument with Yvonne over Brian's messages to Christine, Brian, fueled by anger and alcohol, attacked Yvonne and fatally stabbed her. He then dismembered her body in the bathtub with a machete, using the same weapon to kill Yvonne's dogs, and placed their remains in his military backpack. The limbs that couldn't fit in the bag were discarded in the ocean, thrown off a rocky cliff early in the morning, along with a blood-stained mattress. Brian then carried the backpack deep into the island and submerged it in a swamp. For the following weeks, he stayed in the same coastal house, carefully removing any traces of the crime. He told the locals a convincing story about his girlfriend leaving him for another man, which led them to sympathize with him. He even found a new girlfriend, Nicole Powell, who comforted him for a few weeks until he left for the U.S. During the trial, Nicole testified against Brian, accusing him of dishonesty and being cruel. With strong evidence against him, Brian admitted his guilt but argued it was in self-defense, claiming that Yvonne had attacked him first with a knife, which he then used to defend himself. He stated that everything that happened afterward was due to shock, insisting he didn't remember dismembering her body or handling the dogs. However, his internet searches and efforts to destroy evidence showed that he was fully aware of his actions and tried to create a false narrative to explain Yvonne's disappearance. In the spring of 2016, Brian was convicted of manslaughter and received a 26-year prison sentence, with the chance for parole in 2035. His prior service in the Marines was taken into account during sentencing, which helped him avoid a life sentence. Additionally, Brian's wife, Christine Verhoeven, expressed her belief in his innocence and her unwavering support for him. The tragic case of Yvonne Baldelli highlights not only the devastating impact of domestic violence and deceit, but also the tireless pursuit of justice by her family. Despite the initial fog of lies and misdirection, the truth ultimately emerged, revealing a chilling narrative of betrayal and loss. Yvonne's story serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of vigilance and support for those in perilous situations, urging us to seek justice for victims and ensure that their voices are never silent. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Blumel family. Roger Blumel was born on January 17, 1965, into a lively family with his parents and 7 siblings, 6 brothers and 1 sister. The family was not only large but also close-knit, instilling strong values and a sense of community. Even in high school, Roger was a diligent young man with future ambitions. He started driving his father's truck and, after finishing high school, worked in concrete transportation. Eventually, he realized his true passion was in sales, where he achieved success. His friends often said that he could sell ice to an Eskimo, which showed his amazing sales skills. This talent came with a generous, cheerful, and outgoing personality. He always seemed happy, and nothing pleased him more than making everyone around him smile. Roger had a good life and an excellent relationship with his family. The only thing missing was a partner, and one day he found that too. Although he did not elaborate, a close friend recounted that one evening, when he met a young woman who captivated him, Roger declared with complete determination that she was the woman he was going to marry. Melissa was born in Wichita on January 1, 1960. She grew up in a loving family with 3 girls and 3 boys, though sadly, a younger sister passed away before her first birthday. Melissa was a kind and diligent person, always willing to assist her family and others. She started her career as an accountant at a bank and built a successful path over the years. Her dedication, commitment, and teamwork earned her numerous promotions, eventually becoming vice president of the bank. In 1991, she met her soulmate, and they got married. Life appeared perfect for the Blumel family. Melissa advances in her banking career, while Roger uses his confidence to start his own business. Roger enjoyed spending time with friends and spreading happiness. He found an ideal partner in Melissa. Both shared a strong sense of social responsibility, actively participating in charity, sports, and community events. Although, as we've seen in almost every story, a perfect life doesn't exist, for the Blumel family, the only thing missing was a child to fill their loving home with laughter and joy. Unfortunately, this wish remained out of reach for the couple, and after years of unsuccessful attempts to conceive, Roger and Melissa began considering the idea of adopting a child. To fulfill their goal, they reached out to a local social worker and found out that a woman named Kisha Shaberg had put her 2 sons up for adoption. Her sons are Anthony, a 7-year-old whom everyone calls Tony, and Christopher, a 4-year-old known as Chris. Kisha wanted an open adoption, allowing her to keep in touch with her sons and the adoptive family. However, the Blumel family preferred to adopt the children without maintaining those connections, aiming to provide a fresh start for them away from their difficult past. Roger and Melissa's plan finally worked, and from that moment on, Anthony and Christopher officially became part of the Blumel family, starting to enjoy a life they never imagined. Emotional, Anthony was surprised to be able to have dinner every day. The kids adapted quickly and began to enjoy their new life. They attended elementary school and successfully completed that stage as good students. In high school, they also did well, had no issues with their peers, integrated completely, and formed a large group of friends. Plus, they excelled in sports, especially wrestling and football. Anthony quickly advanced in wrestling, earning 2nd place in a competition in his division. At that time, everything seemed to promise a bright future for the boys and a happy life for the whole family. However, the Blumel family began to fall apart when Anthony was in his senior year of high school. The young man, who had previously behaved admirably, started to change. He became someone who frequently argued with his parents, claiming they always favored his younger brother, Christopher. He began drinking alcohol, ignored curfews, and even smoked marijuana. Life in the Blumel household descended into chaos, and it soon appeared that any hope of the young man getting back on track was lost. For a long time, Anthony dreamed of joining the United States Air Force after high school, but his own actions ended that possibility. In 2013, he was arrested for an unspecified violent act and later, after graduation, for driving under the influence of alcohol. With these incidents on his record, a future in military aviation was no longer possible. Rather than reflecting on his situation, Anthony spiraled further downward. After graduating, his life lacked direction. He didn't want to study or work, All he wanted was to sleep late and spend his days in a haze of cannabis smoke. Melissa was terrified of the boy's angry outbursts, causing her to endure extremely difficult pressure. Adding to the complexity, there was something the Blummel family was unaware of. Since the spring of 2013, Kisha has been in contact with her biological sons through social media. It appeared that Christopher either ignored Kisha's friend request or showed little interest in communicating with his biological mother. In contrast, Anthony promptly accepted the connection and was thrilled to reunite with his real mother. Kisha was heartbroken after giving her sons to the Blummel family, but she found comfort in knowing they were both welcomed into a good home and would stay together. Despite this, she struggled with the lack of contact. Reconnecting with her eldest son filled her with joy, though she also felt deep resentment towards the Blummel family, believing they had turned Christopher against her. However, this resentment was overshadowed by the happiness of reuniting with her firstborn. Moreover, when she heard about Anthony's issues with his adoptive parents, Kisha became hopeful about reuniting with him and quickly invited him to visit her. Meanwhile, at the adoptive family's house, instead of getting better, things were getting worse. The conflict reached a boiling point when one day, during one of his tantrums, Anthony punched a hole in the wall. This was a turning point for the Blummel family. They could no longer risk their own safety or Christopher. After several unsuccessful attempts to stop the eldest son's behavior, Roger and Melissa made the tough decision to tell Anthony he had to leave the house. The young man initially wandered without purpose but soon realized he needed to support himself. He found some jobs at fast food restaurants and supplemented his small income by selling cannabis. Although he slept like a nomad, staying at various friends' houses, he fell in with a group of youths heavily involved in drug abuse. In the midst of these challenging circumstances, a glimmer of hope appeared when Kisha invited him to come live with her in California. Anthony eagerly accepted, and they reunited at Kisha's home in September 2013. He was accompanied by his best friend from high school, Braden, who had dropped out in his junior year to dedicate himself to drug dealing. The two young men were excited because they hoped to get Kisha's support to start a large marijuana business in the area, as she was experienced in the drug trade. They even considered entering the medical cannabis market. In reality, the two young men ended up living in a small one-room apartment. It's easy to see how tensions arose, especially since Sean, Kisha's partner, worked 2 jobs and was the only one providing for 5 people. Kisha contributed only a portion of the social assistance she received for her daughter. Meanwhile, Kisha, Anthony, and Braden spent their days using drugs, and Kisha's younger daughter was constantly exposed to this negative environment. At one point, things became unacceptable when Sean discovered that Anthony and Braden were selling marijuana near their house. He informed them that their actions were unacceptable and dangerous for his as the property owner, and insisted they take their drugs elsewhere. Following this incident, Sean issued an ultimatum to all the house occupants: everyone must find a job or leave the apartment. Instead of urging people to change as he intended, his actions led them to form an alliance and express their indignation towards his. They decided to leave the apartment and stay at a nearby hotel for 2 weeks. However, this was not a viable solution because after those weeks, they lacked the income to continue paying for the hotel. Their need for money didn't lead them to consider honest work. Their first thought was to return to Kansas, likely because Anthony knew the drug trade there well. After nearly a day of traveling, the group chose to stop in Arizona and rest overnight at a hotel. During their stay, Anthony shared a disturbing idea with his companions. He planned to kill his adoptive parents to claim their inheritance. When they arrived in Wichita, they booked a hotel room for a month and focused on planning the details of the affair. The plan was straightforward. They needed to eliminate Roger and Melissa, collect the insurance money, sell their assets, and use the proceeds to start a larger-scale drug operation. Anthony believed that the family he had returned to could become wealthy by growing and selling marijuana. He even suggested the ideal day for the crime, Friday, November 15, 2013, when his brother Christopher would be away at a wrestling event. Anthony, a former star wrestler, had stayed connected with some team members and found out about Christopher's commitment that night. Anthony gradually developed a plan to invite Roger and Melissa out under the pretense of discussing and resolving previous issues. Meanwhile, Braden would take Kisha to their home while it was empty so she could steal valuables. Anthony knows where his foster parents keep money for emergencies. The plan was to make it look like a robbery gone wrong, but from the start, the true intention was for Kisha to end Roger and Melissa's lives when they returned. Everyone initially supported the plan, but later, Braden decided to withdraw. Although he didn't want to be directly involved, he agreed to help by obtaining the necessary guns. Instead, he suggested his friend Andrew, a former high school classmate, to serve as the driver for Kisha to reach the Blumo residence. Braden fulfilled his promise by acquiring 2 pistols from other criminals. It's important to note that there was never any plan to share the money with Andrew. He was promised $11,000 to act mainly as a driver and assist Kisha in the robbery. Ultimately, Kisha was to be in charge. In early November, Kisha shared a photo of herself with Anthony on social media, captioned, "A bond that cannot be broken." Finally, the anticipated day came, Friday, November 15, 2013. As Anthony had expected, his wonderful adoptive parents agreed to meet him without hesitation. The meeting went smoothly. Meanwhile, at the Blumo residence, a different scene unfolded. As soon as Roger and Melissa left for the meeting, Kisha and Andrew broke into the house by forcing open the garage door. They began searching through the house, seizing small valuable items and cash that the couple had kept for emergencies. After completing the first phase of their plan, Kisha and Andrew hid near the secluded house, waiting for Roger and Melissa to return. Shortly after, they received a call from Anthony. Anthony told them that the meeting was over and that his foster parents had left him at a hotel before going home. They didn't have to wait long. When the Blumo vehicle halted in front of the parking gate, 2 attackers emerged from hiding. Kisha quickly positioned herself next to Melissa, while Andrew targeted Roger to keep him still. Melissa, shocked, recognized Kisha as the mother of the children they had adopted over a decade ago to give them love, stability, and a better future. She could only exclaim, "Oh my God, Kisha," before a precise shot to her head caused her to collapse in her seat. Roger, utterly shocked, attempted to help his wife. At that moment, Kisha approached the window and aimed at Roger's head. She pulled the trigger, but the gun jammed. She tried repeatedly to fire while Roger stood frozen beside his wife's lifeless body. Eventually, the gun went off, and Roger fell beside the woman who had been his life's greatest partner. After completing their deadly plan, Kisha and Andrew got into their vehicle and swiftly drove away. The Blumo couple remained there until about 9:15 p.m. when Christopher returned from a meeting and discovered the horrific scene. He quickly called 911, saying he had just come home and found his parents nearly unconscious in their van. He explained that Roger was coughing and Melissa was nodding her head. Both had gunshot wounds to their heads. The dispatcher told him to perform resuscitation attempts while emergency services arrived a few minutes later to take over. Remarkably, the Blumels were still alive, but in critical condition, so they were rushed to a hospital. When they got back to the hotel where they were staying, Kisha seemed to have a panic attack and said she just needed to use an illegal substance, which she did with the other guys. Additionally, around that time, Kisha disposed of the used weapon and a purse containing items she had stolen from the house, so they could be dumped in a nearby stream. Andrew threw the items into a pond in a nearby park. The next day, Anthony used the money he stole from his adoptive parents to start dealing marijuana, earning his first $100. Sadly, that same day, Melissa passed away at the age of 53 after a long battle. Anthony also visited his father in the hospital, unaware that he had been removed from both the Blumel family will and their insurance policies some time earlier. As a result, the two terrible crimes were committed for nothing. In the days that followed, it was discovered that Andrew had not been paid and was unaware that Kisha had taken money from the Blumel family's home. Eventually, they were caught. During the first inspections of the Blumel residence, police noticed the garage door had been forced open and the home was in complete disarray with items scattered everywhere. It was confirmed that money, jewelry, and other items were stolen. Authorities initially thought the attack on the couple happened because they arrived while the thieves were still there. However, it was later determined that the fatal assault occurred before the couple entered the home, so this theory was dismissed. In the van where Roger and Melissa were attacked, investigators found no significant fingerprints, but they did discover a casing. The authorities then focused on the victims' workplaces, suspecting a disgruntled client might have sought revenge, but this theory was dismissed. Next, they decided to speak with people close to the couple. Anthony was first on the detectives' list because he was the last person seen with the victims. However, he insisted he knew nothing about the incident and had not been involved. He claimed that after dinner, he returned directly to the hotel where he was staying with his mother. This was confirmed by the hotel staff. Christopher was second on the list of suspects because he had discovered the bodies. However, he was quickly cleared after confirming that he was at a dinner with the wrestling team during the incident. Despite this, investigators noticed something unusual about his behavior. He didn't seem very upset and appeared deep in thought. When the police asked him who he thought might be responsible for what happened to his parents, Christopher promptly mentioned one person. He said the only person who might have a grudge against his parents and possibly commit such an act was his older brother, Anthony. Thanks to this crucial tip, the authorities caught a lucky break in their search for the culprits. A man reached out to the police to say that a young guy, a friend of Anthony, had approached him wanting to buy a gun. The detectives focused their attention on this person, and upon checking his background, they found he had a long history connected to drugs. They also found out that he had traveled to California with Anthony. The guy in question was Braden. Braden soon received a message from his family letting him know that investigators from the sheriff's office wanted to question him about the incident involving the Blumels. The next morning, Braden went to the police station. A press report revealed that on his way there, he stopped by a pond to discard something, reportedly the guns used in the crime that hadn't been disposed of as intended. According to this report, he was already under surveillance, and when the police searched the water, they found a bag he had thrown in, containing a pistol that hadn't been fired during the attack. Braden's interrogation lasted 3 days. Initially, he insisted he was not involved in the incident. However, under pressure from authorities, he eventually confessed everything he knew, explaining that the plan for the attack was Anthony's idea. Anthony Blumel, 18, and his biological mother Kisha, 35, were arrested on November 19 at the hotel where they were staying. In addition, Andrew, who was also 18, was arrested, followed by Braden's arrest on November 20, 2013. At that time, Kisha did not admit to being involved in the robbery and other crimes, even though the 3 young men confessed to what had happened. On November 25, 2013, the accused first appeared in court via video conference. During this appearance, they were all charged with the same offenses: first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery, burglary, and theft. The 3 young men were set a bail of $500,000, and for Kisha, the bail was set at $1 million. On December 21, Rogers passed away at the age of 48, joining his beloved Melissa. After his death, the situation worsened for the woman and the 3 young men, as they faced the risk of being charged with capital murder, which could lead to a death penalty sentence. On January 3, 2014, the 4 detainees were officially charged with capital murder, accused of being responsible for the deaths of multiple people in the same incident. Additionally, Kisha was charged with 2 counts of aggravated robbery, 1 count of burglary, and 1 count of theft. The preliminary hearing was held on July 17 of that year. By that time, Braden had negotiated with the authorities and became the prosecution's star witness in exchange for a reduced sentence. After a year of negotiations, not only did Braden reach an agreement, but 2 other individuals involved in the crime also negotiated with the prosecution. According to the agreements, the accused would not contest the charges against them and would waive their right to appeal their sentences. In return, the prosecution agreed not to seek the death penalty and to drop some charges. Starting in mid-2015, each of them confirmed their decision to plead guilty in separate hearings. The judge sentenced Kisha to life in prison without parole for the capital murder charge and an additional 122 months for 2 counts of aggravated robbery. These sentences will be served consecutively. When given the chance to speak, she expressed deep regret for what happened and sympathized with the Blummel family. However, the rest of her statement was controversial, as she claimed she was not involved in the incident and harbored no ill will towards the Blummels. Instead, she expressed great respect for them, acknowledging that they had provided Anthony and Christopher with a wonderful life, for which she remained grateful. Official records indicate that Kisha is still held in a high-security correctional facility. The next to face his fate was his son, Anthony Blummel, known to everyone as Tony, who received the same sentence as his mother. During the sentencing hearing, Anthony, who chose not to speak when given a chance, listened to the victim impact statement made by his aunt, Christina Blummel. She thanked the authorities for delivering justice and spoke about all the love that Roger and Melissa had shown the boy. In complete silence, Anthony listened to Christina's heartfelt words, and at one point, tears almost welled up in the young accused's eyes. Ultimately, the woman informed Anthony that he had made his decisions voluntarily. She suggested that he might eventually understand his choices, or perhaps he never will. Since then, Anthony has been in a correctional facility. Up to now, his record includes numerous infractions, such as smuggling, fighting, unauthorized phone use, explicit sexual activity, theft, and disobedience, among others. A week after those trials, it was Andrew's turn, the only one who refused to admit his responsibility. He was found guilty of first and second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison plus 155 months. Finally, Braden, the last person involved in the incident, who had made a plea deal with the prosecution from the start, was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 242 years in prison. According to his official record, Braden will have his first chance to be released on May 28, 2035. However, his prison record shows he hasn't reformed, as he has received 71 disciplinary reports for disobedience, threatening others, using stimulants, drunkenness, possession of contraband tobacco, theft, and dangerous smuggling, among other reasons. Ultimately, the district attorney was satisfied with the case's outcome. Although Kisha had given up that option, she unsuccessfully tried to appeal her sentences. The undeniable fact at the conclusion of this story is that the lives of 2 wonderful people, Roger and Melissa Blummel, ended in a tragic and needless way. The tragedy began with the bitterness or guilt of a woman who lived a life of excess and gave her children up for adoption. She couldn't handle the fact that one of her descendants no longer wanted contact with her. This seemingly caused her to misdirect her anger towards the people who had lovingly cared for her children. Anthony reacted to the couple's love and care with resentment, envy, and violence. He turned to substance abuse and eventually committed 2 crimes. Kisha's younger daughter was placed in foster care. On the other hand, Christopher Blummel overcame the loss, the pain, and with the support of his family, he lived a positive life. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Peter Tobin. Peter Britton Tobin was born on August 27, 1946, in Johnstone, Scotland. He was the youngest of 8 children born to Marjorie and Daniel Tobin. From an early age, Peter displayed an impulsive personality, prompting his parents to send him to boarding school in 1953 when he was only 7 years old. However, this did not work, and he was sent to a reformatory. After completing his time there, he moved to Brighton, England. There, Peter began a relationship with Margaret Mount, a young typist who was attracted to his personality. They married in August 1969, but soon, Peter's ruthless, controlling, and abusive personality manifested itself. Not only that, Peter also became involved in criminal activities. A year later, he was convicted and imprisoned in England for theft and counterfeiting. Margaret decided to divorce him in 1973. Peter then married Sylvia Jeffrey, a 30-year-old local nurse, who was also attracted to his charm. That year, they had their first son, Ian, and a year later, a daughter, Claire, who unfortunately died shortly after birth. Sylvia was devastated by the loss of her child, became a victim of Peter's abuse, and decided to leave in 1976, taking their young son with her. Years later, when he was in his 40s, Peter was ready for a new romantic relationship. This time, he chose Kathy Wilson, a sensitive, naive, and impressionable 16-year-old girl. This made it easy for Peter to start a relationship with Kathy. The two moved in together, and soon after, their son, Daniel, was born. They married in 1989 and moved to Scotland. This was a difficult time for Kathy. Her husband was controlling, preventing her from going out and becoming increasingly violent. Eventually, Kathy bravely decided to run away with her son in the late 1990s. Kathy's departure brought out the worst in Peter. After Kathy left, Peter met a gentle girl named Vicky Hamilton. Vicky was born in Scotland in 1976 and was the second child of Michael and Janet Hamilton. She had 3 siblings, Sharon, Lee, and Lindsay. However, arguments arose between Peter and Vicky and they quickly divorced. Vicky, Lee, and Lindsay lived with their mother and moved to South London. Sharon still lives in Bath, but this did not prevent Vicky and Sharon from maintaining the same close relationship as before. The evening of February 10th was cold and snowy. On a hangout with Sharon, Vicky checked her fare and went over the bus route with Sharon. They hugged goodbye. At the bus stop, while eating a bag of chips, Vicky met Peter. He pulled Vicky into his car, raped her, and then killed her. When Vicky failed to visit her mother's house, and there was no news of her, her family began to search for her. They reported her disappearance to the police. As the police investigated the case, Vicky's image became prominent across Scotland, and the search for her became one of the largest in the country's history. The runaway theory was reinforced on February 21, 1991, when Vicky's purse was found near the main bus station in Edinburgh. It was, in fact, a false clue planted by Peter to throw investigators off track. The attempt was successful, sending the investigation off track. Detectives spent 2 months searching London unsuccessfully. It was then revealed that Vicky's mother had died. Over the next 10 years, Vicky's family and townspeople continued to pursue the case, but with more than 7,000 names on file, nearly 4,000 statements taken, some 500 documents and 380 potential physical evidence, all to no avail. The case was eventually dropped. The next young woman to have Peter's misfortune was Dinah McNichol, an Essex native with a brother and 3 sisters. Her father was a jazz musician and her mother had died in a car accident many years earlier. At 18, Dinah was a kind, cheerful girl and a great friend. She had just graduated from high school and had high hopes for the future. She was torn between taking a year off to travel or going to college, but she was undecided. On the first weekend of August 1991, Dinah attended a music festival in Hampshire. There, she met a boy named David Tremlett. They quickly fell in love. On Sunday, August 4th, they spent the night together in a tent. The next day, Dinah helped him take down the tent and they agreed to each hitchhike home. As they were both tired, Peter showed up and offered to give them a ride. David got out of the car first, and Dinah saved Peter's number before parting ways. Alone with the strange driver, the girl was about to face a real nightmare. On Monday, August 5th, 1991, he did the same to her as he had done to Vicky. Dinah's scarf became a crime tool. After the crime, Peter withdrew money from Dinah's account at ATMs in Hampshire and Sussex. When Dinah's family saw the withdrawals from her account, they immediately suspected something was wrong. They knew she had carefully saved every penny and planned to use it for travel or education. As the days passed, the family lived in fear and uncertainty, which was the worst thing. Although no one said it, everyone believed that something terrible had happened. If Dinah were still alive, she would have returned home or called to explain her absence. As for Peter, he left Margate without saying goodbye or explaining anything. In 1993, he settled in Hampshire, renting a flat in Leek Park, saying he wanted to be closer to his son. On August 4th, 1993, two 14-year-old girls went to visit Dinah but did not see her. So they asked the neighbors if anyone had seen Dinah, which led to them knocking on Peter's door. Peter invited the two girls into his house, ostensibly to wait for Dinah. They saw his friendly 5-year-old son and agreed without suspicion. While the child was asleep, Peter began to torment the two girls. He threatened them with a knife and forced them to drink alcohol, then beat and raped them. One of the girls was seriously injured. Fortunately, the child woke up in time and saved them from the same terrible fate as the two previous victims. Peter wanted to hide the truth from his son, so he decided to leave the apartment with the child. Before leaving at around 2 a.m., he turned on the gas stove to complete his monstrous plan. However, the two girls were lucky to wake up and escape. They went to the police and reported everything that had happened. After that, Peter returned the child to his mother and joined a sect called the Jesus Fellowship under a false name. But the media published his photo, provided by the police, and his face became widely known. With the help of BBC Crime Watch, Peter was finally arrested after 40 days on the run in Brighton. Peter appeared in court on May 18, 1994 and pleaded guilty to sexual assault and indecent assault on two young girls. As a result, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison. However, Peter was released in 2014 at the age of 58 without serving the full sentence. After his release, Peter returned to Scotland with the aim of hiding in the same area to avoid being identified as a sex offender. He evaded capture for a long time until 2006. During this time, Peter used a false name and posed as a homeless person. He sought refuge at St. Patrick's Cathedral in Glasgow. Under the name Peter McLaughlin, Peter approached a charity couple from the church group, Dennis and Katie Curran. Katie still felt uneasy about Peter despite his frail appearance. On the other hand, having been raised Catholic, Peter felt comfortable in the church. He begged there, which helped him gain sympathy from the parishioners. This gave Peter the freedom to move around unnoticed and provided him with an ideal hiding place. Here, Peter met Angelica Kluck, a 23-year-old girl from Poland. She came to Scotland in the summer of 2006 to work and pay for her language lessons. Angelica was living in the rectory of St. Patrick's Church and doing cleaning work. Peter took an immediate liking to Angelica and convinced her to help him with various tasks. On Sunday, September 24, 2006, Angelica helped Peter paint a shed. Some parishioners saw them together. But unexpectedly, Peter attacked Angelica at the back of the chapel. Leica Brown, 47, and her husband, Andrew, 46, were at home when they heard a woman screaming through an open window. Leica described the scream as a short, loud sound, like someone being forcibly restrained. The scream made her nervous and she got up from her chair, but when she got to the window, she couldn't see anything. Hours passed and the parishioners noticed that Angelica was no longer there. That was when Dennis and Katie quickly reported the unusual disappearance to the police. The police immediately began investigating and interviewed every member of the community. During these interviews, it was discovered that the last person anyone saw with Angelica was Peter, albeit under the guise of a homeless. He eventually became the prime suspect and the police came to question him, but found no evidence. The investigation continued. Peter knew that it was only a matter of time before they found the body and traced it back to him, so he fled to London. By this time, Detective David Swindle had joined the investigation and began to suspect that this might not just be a disappearance. Everything they found, as well as the testimonies they gathered, made him think that Angelica was unlikely to be found alive. Finally, on September 29, 2006, authorities discovered the body in the chapel. This news shocked British society, especially because of the location chosen by the perpetrator to hide the body. Looking at the injuries sustained by the girl, Detective David suspected that the perpetrator was not acting for the first time. However, there was more news to come. The DNA found at the crime scene and on the victim's body matched the data in the United Kingdom's National Criminal Intelligence Database. That's when they learned that the man they were looking for was Peter Tobin, whose fingerprints were also found at the crime scene. The first step for the authorities was to publish his photograph in the media. His image was also sent nationwide for distribution and the Scottish police contacted the Metropolitan Police, initiating a search throughout the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Peter, who was in London, tried to hide in a place where he believed he wouldn't be sought. He went to a hospital, pretending to have heart problems, claiming to have chest pain and weakness on the left side of his body. He identified himself as a plumber and called himself James Kelly. He was examined by Dr. Nick Lasso, who conducted several tests. However, something in his demeanor and behavior made the doctor uncomfortable. Initially, he avoided eye contact, which was unusual for a patient. Then, when the tests didn't reveal any physical reasons for the pain he claimed to be experiencing, the doctor became suspicious. His suspicions were confirmed by a nurse who recognized Peter from a photograph circulating in the media. As a result, both the nurse and the doctor contacted the police. This phone call changed the entire dynamic of the investigation. On September 30th, police officer Alan Murray was dispatched to the hospital in London. Peter was taken to a room and Alan went to talk to him. He was immediately arrested. Although initially, he was charged only with a violation of the sex offender registry, this thing allowed the officers to buy time to prepare a criminal case against him. Evidence gathered by the police team led by Detective David led to Peter's trial for the crimes committed against Angelica in late March 2007. Despite all the evidence against him, Peter denied committing any violent acts against the young woman. However, in an attempt to shift blame for the rape, he claimed that they engaged in consensual sexual activity. Peter also denied providing false information to the police and hospital staff. After 6 weeks of legal proceedings, his lies and manipulations proved futile as he was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Detective David and his team suspected that there were more mysteries to Peter's story. During the trial, the detectives further investigated Peter's life, gathered more evidence and built a profile with the cooperation of various law enforcement agencies. To avoid affecting the case involving Angelica, they chose to carry out their work discreetly and carefully. The joint police investigation was called Anagram. Investigators identified links between the disappearances and locations that Peter had visited. The investigation revealed two exact links, one in Bathgate and one in Margate. A search was then carried out at Peter's old house on the coast, and they found a knife with traces of DNA hidden in the attic. However, no other findings were made at the location. Investigators then visited the house where he lived in Margate and established that he was a dangerous serial offender. A search of the house revealed a secret grave in the garden that he had created for his son. Investigators dug up a sand pit in the garden and found the body of a woman. Further searches at the same location uncovered another body. A woman's handbag was found at the crime scene and was collected for DNA analysis. As well as identifying the two victims, the handbag was also analyzed. Although the handbag clearly contained DNA, there was no match in the National DNA database. However, on June 1, 2007, investigators found a DNA match to Peter's fingerprints. This was a vital lead, and they decided to pursue this line of investigation. On November 14, 2007, the authorities confirmed that one of the bodies was that of Vicky Hamilton, who had gone missing at the age of 15. Her family had waited 16 years for any information about her. They later identified the second body as that of 18-year-old Dinah McNichol, who was hitchhiking home after attending a concert. On September 1, 2008, the Crown Prosecution Service charged Peter with Vicky's murder, leading to his trial. When Vicky's father, Michael, saw Peter, he was restrained by the police, as at that point he just wanted Peter to know that he was there to defend his daughter's honor and remember her. Peter faced sentencing after a month of trial on December 2, 2008, when he was convicted of Vicky's murder and sentenced to life in prison. A year later, in December 2009, Dinah's trial took place. On December 16, due to the defense's failure to provide evidence to exonerate his client, the jury found Peter guilty of Dinah's murder. As a result, he was given an additional life sentence. 5 months before his trial, a report on November 22, 2007, stated that Peter Tobin had been attacked by fellow inmates in prison, but he only suffered minor injuries. During the investigation, Peter Tobin also confessed to a total of 11 murders. Peter died in hospital on October 8, 2022. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Natalie Connolly. Natalie Connolly is a beautiful and charming woman who has a stunning appearance identical to her twin sister. Her sister is equally beautiful, and they share a close bond not only because of their similar appearance but also because of their deep connection. Natalie has a special ability to bring joy to those around her. She can easily make people laugh and chat with anyone she meets. Despite facing the challenges of being a single mother, Natalie always strives to ensure that her daughter, Madison, does not lack anything. Her care and love for Madison are evident in her constant presence and attention. In a crowded bar, Natalie meets John, a charming and elegant man. They are attracted to each other from the beginning, and their relationship gradually blossoms. John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. They exchange contact information and begin to delve deeper into their relationship. As Natalie spends more time with John, she feels an irresistible attraction to him. This was evident from the moment they first met, even though she had no idea of his profession or wealth at the time. As they grow closer, John reveals that he is a millionaire. His wealth is displayed through lavish gifts and fancy dinners at top restaurants. Natalie is fascinated by John's gentlemanly and elegant style, as well as his lavish mansion. However, behind John's charming exterior, there is much more mystery. His life is far more complicated than he lets on. While engaged to a pregnant partner and expecting a second child, John hides the existence of 3 other children. His relationship with Natalie is actually an affair, which continues even as John deals with the breakup of his previous relationship. Eventually, John chooses to turn his attention to Natalie. Their romance seems like a fairy tale from the start. John and Madison become close quickly, and Natalie soon wins the hearts of John's children. John treats Natalie to lavish and romantic experiences, from spa trips to hiring a chauffeur. It seems like he is making all her dreams come true. However, when Natalie moves in with John in Kinver, Stafford, England, the truth slowly emerges. Their relationship, initially fueled by passion, reveals its true nature once they live under the same roof. As they spend every waking moment together, they begin to understand each other better. However, John's interests start to annoy her. He enjoys intimate interactions and often leaves bruises and scratches. Romantic gestures and lavish dinners lose their appeal as Natalie realizes that she has to pay a high price for all of them. Natalie once thought her relationship with John was a fairy tale, but now she realizes the harsh truth behind it. Fearing abandonment, she still accepts John's demands during their intense sexual encounters. She recalls how John abandoned his pregnant ex-fiancée and fears the same thing will happen to her. Despite this, Natalie still feels fulfilled in the relationship and does not want to leave because she fears returning to her old monotonous life. She seeks comfort and guidance from her sister and mother, sharing the bruises and scratches John leaves during their intense sexual encounters. She admits that John enjoys causing her pain. Natalie faces a difficult situation as her relationship with John brings her happiness but also has negative aspects. She is caught in a dilemma of wanting to maintain her luxurious lifestyle with John while being dissatisfied with the intimate aspect of the relationship. The tension between them increases as they both seek out other relationships. As John continues to chat with other women, Natalie also begins texting other men without John's knowledge. When John discovers these exchanges, he becomes very angry. Although John makes no secret of his interactions with other women, he strongly objects to Natalie interacting with other men, highlighting the unfairness of their relationship. Despite John's attempts to hide his insecurities, he invites Natalie out for a casual evening on December 18, 2016, which includes drinks, football, and dinner. John forces Natalie to drink heavily and even offers her cocaine, albeit in smaller amounts than he consumes. This was not the first time he had created such a situation, suggesting a pattern of behavior intended to make Natalie more comfortable before committing bad acts on her when they were home alone. This raises the question of whether Natalie's heavy drinking on these occasions was an attempt to dull the pain she knew she would endure behind closed doors with him. John wanted to be in complete control of the situation, ensuring he could carry out his intentions towards Natalie without being hindered. Therefore, he carefully controlled his alcohol intake, aiming to achieve a mild state of intoxication that did not affect his performance during their sexual encounters. After what seemed like a pleasant day out, ending with a satisfying meal at one of their favorite places, John arranged for a driver to take them home. However, beneath the normal appearance, John's evil intentions were hidden. That day, Natalie was in a drunken state, which only worsened as dinner failed to sober her up or absorb the alcohol. She was disoriented, stumbling out of the car as they arrived home, accidentally leaving her phone behind. Instead of letting Natalie recover from her drunkenness, John had other intentions. He returned to retrieve Natalie's phone, but it is unclear whether he had seen her messages. Natalie became the victim of John's cruel actions as he attempted to inflict maximum harm on her. He attacked her in various ways, including punching, kicking, stomping, and the disgusting act of throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, John used a bottle of carpet cleaner, using its nozzle as a weapon. After the attack, he left Natalie naked and bloody at the bottom of the stairs, her dress pulled up around her waist, leaving her to suffer from her injuries. Natalie lay motionless in a pool of blood when John left the bed. A few hours later, when he awoke, he discovered that Natalie had died from the severe injuries she had sustained, totaling 40. John's subsequent actions, including his nonchalant call to emergency services, revealed his twisted mentality. He showed no emotion or remorse when he informed the paramedics of his futile attempts at CPR and referred to Natalie's unresponsive state with indifference. As the paramedics loaded Natalie's body into the ambulance, John remained silent and emotionless, observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was pronounced dead, John was arrested. To justify his cruel actions, John made the excuse that the rough sex had gone too far and claimed his innocence. He alleged that Natalie had consented to the rough actions, claiming that she had initiated them and that she had been the one who desired all these brutal actions. According to John, Natalie allegedly requested rough sex, including being injured, beaten, and even having a bottle of carpet cleaner inserted into her. John claimed that, despite bleeding and in pain, Natalie allegedly reassured him that she was safe and wanted to continue. However, John's account is not credible. He attempted to deflect blame by saying that Natalie had agreed to engage in rough sex and that they had engaged in similar acts many times without issue. When asked about leaving Natalie partially clothed at the bottom of the stairs, John offered a weak excuse, claiming it was a regular occurrence and that he had never provided a blanket because the house was always warm. Throughout the proceedings, John showed no remorse or regret for his actions. Instead, he placed the blame squarely on Natalie. His attempts to shift the blame left onlookers frustrated. Despite being convicted of manslaughter, John received a lenient sentence of 3 years and 8 months, but only served 22 months before being released. Natalie Connolly's case sparked widespread criticism and controversy, leading Fiona McKenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. The movement aims to promote discussion about sexual assault and calls for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, the defense minimizes and legitimizes violence in intimate relationships, perpetuates harmful stereotypes, and devalues the experiences of survivors. However, in interviews, Fiona has been surprised that some people, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, have accepted it. The reason for this acceptance is that they believe the incident was isolated, not a systemic problem. However, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, with survivors being held responsible for the risks that may have resulted from their behavior. Such attitudes highlight the need for continued advocacy and education to challenge harmful beliefs and support survivors of sexual violence. The Domestic Violence Bill was passed by Parliament on July 6, 2020, and following royal assent on April 29, 2021, it became law and is known as the Domestic Violence Act 2021. This marks a significant step forward in combating domestic violence and preventing perpetrators from using harmful excuses to justify their actions. Natalie's loss has left a deep void in the lives of her family and friends. They are still grappling with the pain of her loss. However, their unwavering love and support for Natalie is a testament to her strong and resilient spirit. The community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and support survivors on their journeys to healing and recovery. Their solidarity and compassion are an inspiration and hope to those struggling. Although Natalie Connolly's life was tragically cut short, her memory will live on in the hearts of those who knew and loved her. Her story will hopefully inspire us to come together to fight domestic violence and support those in need. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Juan Carlos Garcia. Abril Perez was born on November 18, 1971 in Monterrey, Mexico. She is the second of 3 children. Her parents, Maria and Manuel, did their best to provide their children with a good education and aspirations for a better life. Together with her brother Javier and sister Ana, Abril's family lived a simple but hopeful life. Abril, Ana, and Javier all excelled in school, participating in musical activities, sports, and developing their talents. However, Abril showed early on a special ability in mathematics and business skills. She was an avid reader and was always the best student in her class. As a teenager, Abril started working to become financially independent, saving and always having savings from her school days. She was very disciplined, able to plan and manage her time effectively. Her goal was to get a quality college education to secure a well-paying job with plenty of career advancement opportunities. After graduating from high school, Abril was accepted into the most prestigious university in Nuevo Leon, where she earned a master's degree in finance and business administration. Her classmates described her as smart, focused, and ambitious, but also fun-loving, kind, and always ready to help others. After graduating, Abril was hired into the sales department of one of the largest and fastest-growing companies in the country. A few years later, she tried her hand at digital sales, a new and rapidly growing field, and realized it was the right fit for her. She quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the company's CEO within 2 years. Abril was young, beautiful, successful, ambitious, and on her way to the life she had always dreamed of. She built a brilliant career, provided for her family, and had many plans for the future. However, her personal life remained unstable, disappointing her loved ones. Abril believed that she would find true love and live a long, happy life. In the mid-1990s, when Abril's career was going strong, she met a young man named Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez. A little over 3 years older than Abril, he had similar career ambitions to hers, which impressed her. In turn, he was attracted to her beauty, charm, kindness, radiant smile, along with her sharp intellect and strong determination. Juan Carlos graduated from a prestigious University of Science and Technology, where he excelled in the fields of economics and commerce. He then went on to study at Harvard University in the United States before returning to Mexico and building a successful career in the rapidly growing e-commerce sector. After meeting at a conference focused on the latest financial technologies, Abril and Juan Carlos met several more times as their companies worked on joint projects. Eventually, Juan Carlos realized that he had fallen in love with this intelligent and beautiful woman. Juan got Abril's phone number through mutual acquaintances, called Abril, and asked her out. Initially, they were both attracted to each other. Abril found Juan intelligent and energetic, able to chat about any topic. The relationship between the two developed rapidly, and by 1998, they decided to get married. At that time, both had achieved considerable success in their careers and were involved in developing online stores, a promising direction. Their life was like a real fairy tale, attracting the envy and admiration of those around them. After 3 years of marriage, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Ana Cecilia, in 2001. At that time, Abril was 30 years old and she was extremely happy because the birth of the child marked a new chapter in their lives. Her husband also seemed happy and loved their newborn daughter. 2 years later, Abril gave birth to a son named Juan Carlos Jr. And 2 years later, the family welcomed a third child, a boy named Julio Andreas. Abril is a hardworking, active young mother who hardly takes any maternity leave. She still maintains a balance between her motherly responsibilities and her thriving career. Every day, Abril cooks delicious meals, helps her children with their homework, takes them to sports and tries to be a good friend to them. Their family appears to be perfect. They are wealthy, successful, and have 3 well-behaved children. However, appearances do not always reflect reality. The problems within their family were not known for a long time, even to those closest to them. In fact, one showed his true colors in the early years of their marriage. He was hot-tempered, aggressive, and very demanding. He did not like to compromise and wanted everything exactly his way. At first, Abril thought that over time, his personality would soften. However, Juan Carlos's true personality was still there. But they still had joint projects, and their teamwork brought impressive results. However, over time, he became more angry, and the verbal arguments gradually escalated into physical violence. After the birth of their first daughter, Juan had a period of calm, trying to restrain his emotions. But this restraint did not last. Unfortunately, after the birth of his eldest son and continuing after the birth of his third child, he no longer tried to be a good father or husband. Juan Carlos often vented his anger and negative emotions on his wife, not keeping any negative emotions to himself. He insulted and belittled his wife, who was the mother of their children, and it seemed that she had to endure this suffering. He often physically abused his wife, but in order not to leave any marks on her body, he forced her to hide her injuries with clothes or makeup. All these actions were done to protect his perfect reputation and pride in being considered a good man. Abril kept silent for many years, trying not to tell her sister and mother about her terrible life. She could support herself with a well-paid job and could raise her children, giving them a good and stable life, but her husband was a rich and influential man. He could use his power and money to gain custody of the children through the courts, forcing her to stay silent and endure this abuse for a long time. Knowing the true nature of Juan Carlos, Perez could not accept that her daughter and son were left alone with someone who could do anything without control. The family situation reached a dead end by the beginning of 2010. Those who had thought this was an ideal family began to suspect that something serious was going on inside. Abril became desperate, terribly thin, suffered from insomnia, and often had bruises on his face and body that became difficult to hide and impossible to explain. Juan Carlos remained calm and confident, pretending that everything was fine in public. He continued to portray the role of a loving and caring husband, polite and affectionate to his wife, but the reality was completely different when he was at home. He became a cruel person, making it dangerous to be around him. Although Abril's loved ones asked for a divorce, Abril insisted that everything was fine and that she would resolve the issue with her husband herself. 2014 marked the peak of Sanchez's career when he became the director of a large trading company and one of the most influential people in the field. After his promotion, his family moved to Mexico City and settled in a large house in one of the capital's most beautiful neighborhoods. Their children attended a prestigious private school. Abril hoped that the move and the complete change of scenery would improve their relationship. However, the opposite happened. Juan continued to hurt and insult his wife, even in front of their children. He began to accuse her of infidelity without any basis. Whenever she tried to defend herself, he resorted to violence, claiming to find evidence of her infidelity. He monitored her phone and emails and banned her from using social media. After that, finding no evidence, he even hired a private investigator to follow Abril and take pictures of any man who came near her. Over the next 4 years, Abril tried everything to save her marriage, although her husband's behavior became completely unbearable. She lived in a never-ending nightmare. On the surface it seemed like a happy and successful marriage. Many people were even jealous of Abril because she had a famous, influential, wealthy and, as many thought, caring husband. In 2018, the Sanchez family visited the Perez family in Monterrey to celebrate Christmas. However, Juan Carlos continued to treat his wife roughly, even in front of her parents. The incident left them extremely shocked and appalled. After witnessing this, Abril realized that she could not continue living like this and decided to divorce. She informed Juan of her intention, but he reacted with rage, choking her to the point that she almost fainted. The incident only stopped and Abril's mother entered the room and intervened. Upon returning to Mexico City, Abril decided to divorce and moved to another bedroom in the house. However, this did not protect her from her husband's violence. On the morning of January 4th, her husband entered the bedroom and attacked her with a baseball bat. Abril was lucky to escape death by slipping out of bed. She screamed, and their children ran into the room. The youngest son protected his mother while the eldest son took the baseball bat from his father. Together, They ran out of the house and to the hospital where Abril received the medical attention she needed. Doctors diagnosed Abril with a severe concussion and a deep wound above her eyebrow, which required stitches. Shortly after Abril and the children left the house, Juan Carlos contacted a lawyer and posted on social media about the conflict between him and his wife, claiming that his wife had betrayed him. Juan Carlos also claimed that his wife had taken all the money from the safe and that when he tried to stop her, she had stabbed him with a knife. As evidence, he posted a photo of a bloody knife and blood stains on the floor. However, the blood on the floor was actually Abril's, from her own room. The photo of the knife was also taken from the internet. Despite this, Juan Carlos' friends believed his story and reshared it on social media, drawing attention to the incident. While still in the hospital, Abril sued her husband for intentional injury. After being discharged from the hospital, she left the house and moved in with her sons. According to the temporary decision, she was granted sole custody of the children. Their eldest daughter, now of age and in college, sided with her mother and denounced her father's cruelty. Juan was ordered to pay alimony to his ex-wife and sons while they lived with their mother. The amount of alimony was relatively small, about $300. However, Sanchez refused to pay and faced jail time. However, given his status as an influential businessman, he believed he would not face any punishment. After experiencing the nightmare, Abril decided to return to her hometown of Monterrey, to her parents' house, taking her children with her. There, she filed for divorce and monitored the situation. At the same time, she began providing online support and counseling to women in similar situations. She also planned to open a center for psychological and legal support for victims of domestic violence. However, the judicial system was disappointing. It was not until September 2019, 8.5 months after the incident, that Sanchez was arrested for causing bodily harm and attempting to kill his wife. He was sent to prison, but after just over a month, he successfully appealed and was released in November of that year. The case was presided over by Judge Federico M., who surprisingly reclassified the case, leading to a new trial. During the trial, Abril's hospital photos and entries from her medical records were not presented. At the same time, the testimony of the woman and her sons was not considered sufficient grounds to detain Juan Carlos. Furthermore, Juan insisted that his ex-wife was turning the children against him. Juan was released immediately from the courtroom because Judge M considered that his actions did not pose a direct threat to the victim's life. According to the judge, if Juan had really intended to end his wife's life, he would have done so, especially since she was asleep during the attack and could not resist. Abril was shocked and frightened when she learned that her ex-husband had been released. She immediately realized that Juan had all the connections and had paid off his way out of jail, putting her and her daughter's lives at risk. She wrote a formal letter to the judge expressing her fear and concern for her life, but it did not seem to have any positive impact. After being released, Juan Carlos initiated a lawsuit for custody of the children. He demanded that she return to Mexico City to attend the hearing, and if she did not attend, the case could be decided without her, which would certainly be disadvantageous to her. She had no choice but to return to the city. Returning to Mexico City was a tragic scene that Abril could not avoid. On November 25th, Abril overcame her fears and went to Mexico City. She feared the man she had been living with, but she knew she had to face reality to protect her children. She planned to leave the city immediately after the hearing and had already bought a plane ticket back, which Juan Carlos also knew. On the day of their custody hearing, a tragic incident occurred. After the hearing, Abril, her sons, and their lawyers got into a car and headed to the airport. However, when they reached a traffic light, a motorcyclist stopped next to their vehicle and suddenly pulled out a pistol, firing 2 shots at Abril, who was sitting in the front passenger seat. He then quickly fled the scene. One bullet passed through and grazed the youngest son, who was sitting in the back seat, but fortunately none of the children were seriously injured. April was taken to the nearest hospital, where doctors tried to save her life for more than 6 hours. However, due to severe injuries and loss of blood, they were unable to save her, and she passed away that evening. April's family immediately flew to the capital and asked the authorities to arrest the person they believed was behind the attack. However, law enforcement agencies had a different view. They said that without identifying the shooter, it would be difficult to determine his motive and the details involved. Meanwhile, Juan Carlos remains free and the police begin searching for the perpetrator, a process that could take a long time. The orphans have been placed in the care of relatives on their mother's side for the time being, while their father prepares for another legal battle to regain custody. April's sister wrote a social media post criticizing Juan for the incident. However, her account was blocked and later deleted. Nevertheless, April's family decided to continue fighting and draw public attention to the case. They stressed that the attack occurred on a day dedicated to protests against domestic violence, which made the incident even more despicable. The public outcry forced the prime suspect, Juan, to flee. April's family drew attention to the tragedy that had befallen them. At the same time, people also began to openly discuss many cases of men trying to kill women but being unpunished and still going free. Mexican politician and women's rights activist Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo has officially confirmed that April's case will be reinvestigated and classified as femicide. Judges could face consequences if Juan Carlos's guilt is proven. Juan Carlos, a businessman who posts frequently on social media, has called for his ex-wife's perpetrators to be found and punished to the fullest extent of the law. He has stated that despite his disagreements with his ex-wife, he would never harm the mother of his children. However, his daughter, Ana Cecilia, has taken a stand against her father and left an angry comment, accusing him of cruelty and including photos of her mother in the hospital after Juan Carlos attacked her with a baseball bat. Despite the case receiving extensive media coverage, it was decided to leave Juan free while the investigation is ongoing. He has been placed under a restraining order and must report to the police weekly. However, after he failed to appear at the scheduled time, a warrant was issued for his arrest. As expected, no one could find the defendant. Juan used his money and connections to quickly leave the country and enter the United States. Mexico contacted Interpol and reported the fugitive accused of serious crimes. The next day, Juan was declared an internationally wanted man. To investigate the case, the police hired a crime scene reconstruction expert. During this time, they also tried to locate the hired criminal. The results showed that he did not act alone. Street camera footage showed 2 vehicles following the car of April, her children, and their lawyer from the courthouse. The motorcyclist committed the murder and appeared to be in constant contact with the people in the aforementioned cars to receive instructions. Investigators spent months identifying some of the people involved in the incident. Finally, on March 5, 2020, 2 suspects were arrested in connection with the case. Surprisingly, the participants in this case did not resist arrest. They immediately began to confess to their actions and surrendered in the hope of reducing their sentences. Through investigation, it was determined that the real mastermind was Juan Carlos. He paid a large sum of money to 7 people who directly participated in this act. The first people to be arrested were the driver of the car that participated in the chase and the motorcyclist who fired the fatal shots. The investigation also showed that, before the incident, Juan Carlos hired several experienced criminals to act as his personal bodyguards while in prison. One of these criminals was released a week before the incident, and the other was released a few days later. After being released from prison, Juan contacted his accomplices again and asked them to find trustworthy people to carry out an assassination. He promised to pay a large sum of money to each of them if they succeeded. Once all the participants were identified, Juan transferred the promised money and provided details of the route and vehicle the victim would use. However, the most difficult part of the plan was luring Juan's ex-wife to Mexico City. He resorted to threatening Abril that he would take the children if she did not appear in court. Although she complied with the court order, she had no intention of staying in the capital and planned to return to Monterrey the same day. Juan learned this information from his sources. It was not until late October 2020 that 3 people involved in the criminal conspiracy were arrested. They were initially arrested on suspicion of distributing narcotics. It was only when they were brought to the police station that it was discovered they might be involved in a serious crime. All of those arrested were members of a major drug trafficking gang headed by Maldonado, also known as Balto. He served time with Juan Carlos and protected him. Maldonado then agreed to help Juan in the murder of his ex-wife in exchange for a large reward. Maldonado was arrested in November 2020 and began to testify. According to his testimony, Juan had been looking for trustworthy people to end the life of his ex-wife, and Maldonado agreed to help. With these statements, it was clear that Juan was both a client and an organizer of the crime. The previous attack on Abril with a baseball bat was reclassified as attempted murder. The court eventually issued an arrest warrant for Juan on charges of murdering his wife. However, his whereabouts are currently unknown. By spring 2021, the remaining participants in Juan's commissioned murder were found and arrested. One of them was arrested for another crime at the time. In addition, during the extended search, the weapon used to carry out the fatal shots was found. A total of 9 people involved in this criminal group have been arrested, of whom 7 were directly involved in the pursuit and murder of Abril. Although it has been nearly 5 years since Abril's death, the main perpetrator and the person who hired him to carry out the crime, Juan Carlos Garcia Sanchez, is still at large and his whereabouts are currently unknown. The person who directly shot the mother of 3 children was sentenced to 52 years in prison. 2 other criminals who participated in the car chase and assisted the shooter were also sentenced to 50 years in prison each. The other arrested participants are still under investigation, and their fate has not been decided.